Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Odd and Untold. This is episode 8, and this week I'm doing something a little different. I was on vacation last week, so I haven't really had much time to prepare a huge episode here. I didn't have any guests lined up. I mean, I have people I want to get on the show, but I just really haven't had the time to schedule anyone in. And I figured this was a good time to talk about something that happened at the place where I vacationed last week, which is a campground in Connecticut called Point Folly from the White Memorial Foundation. And Point Folly is on Bantam Lake. Bantam Lake stretches through Morris County and Litchfield County in Connecticut. And I have been camping there since I can remember. Very small child, probably 5 or 6 years old. I'm 48 now, so you can do the math there, probably better than I can. And we used to go like twice a year if we could, sometimes just once a year, but we'd go up every summer. And nice family campgrounds right on the lake, and we'd have our own little put-ins there where we could just go swimming. And at night, we'd have a nice campfire and look up at the night sky. Really a big part of my childhood, part of my family. And we went last week. My son came, Jake, and my father, Gary, my uncle, Neil. And the four of us went up there starting last Sunday and came home on Wednesday. It was a great trip. We had really good weather. And right before we went, my father had seen on TV on the Travel Channel a show called UFO Witness. And in season 1, episode 2, they talk about the Bantam Lake UFO. And when my father mentioned this to me, I immediately remembered it because I blogged about it years ago. And I'm going to put that up on the screen right now, if I can find it. So here it is. This is an article I had done back in 2012 about an alleged UFO that fell into Bantam Lake in Litchfield, Connecticut. And so I'm going to read the article for you guys, just so you can hear what was initially reported. And then I'll talk about the show UFO Witness, and then I'll talk about some of my own thoughts and some personal experiences I had up there. So this is from the Connecticut Register back in April of 2012. So I'm going to read from the article right now. It was quiet on Bantam Lake Thursday afternoon, with a few scattered showers, but no UFOs. That's what reporters from Eyewitness News, the Connecticut CBS affiliate, and NBC Connecticut news crews were looking for at a parking area on North Shore Road in Bantam, or at least a good follow-up to a story first reported by the Republican American of Waterbury. The story in Thursday morning's paper recounted reports of a glowing, unidentified falling object, that's a new one for UFO, but it tracks, disappearing into Bantam Lake after midnight on Monday. I think it's pretty exciting, the possibility of UFO, but highly unlikely, said Litchfield resident Marie Doyen, hope I'm pronouncing that right, who was out Thursday afternoon at Bantam Lake, which spans the towns of Litchfield and Morris and is Connecticut's largest natural lake. It's actually a very big lake. Love camping on there. Back to the article. According to a report posted by the Associated Press, authorities said they didn't find anything after a state trooper and another person reported the large object falling out of the sky. The Republican American reported that a person driving in Litchfield at about 2 a.m. Tuesday reported that a green, glowing object the size of a whale fell from the sky and crashed into Bantam Lake. Officials say that at about the same time, a state trooper 10 miles away in Warren called dispatchers to report that something fell out of the sky and landed near Bantam or Morris, the AP story said. Morris firefighters made several passes up and down the lake in a boat looking for a possible plane crash, but didn't find any debris, according to the AP story, which said authorities called off the search, leaving the mystery unsolved. I've heard people talking about it. It was green, glowing, whale-sized of an object, said Lindsay Vanyo, an employee at the Green Tomato Deli in Morris, which was formerly the Ripe Tomato and is now under new ownership. Litchfield resident Tina Landau said she just heard about it Thursday morning. It's kind of freaky, and at this point, nobody seems to know. It's pretty wild, said Miss Landau, who lives about a mile from Bantam Lake. I have a pretty open mind about things, but I'm still curious. Moore's first selectman, Barbara Bongiolotti, hope I'm pronouncing that right, said she didn't know anything about the incident until she heard about it from her highway foreman. I have no idea what it might have been or what it was about, said Miss Bongiolotti. Miss Bongiolotti said the Morris firefighters told that they found nothing when they went out. There's a word missing there. According to a report posted by WTNH News 8, the National Weather Service said there was a meteor shower in the area that morning. Goshen resident Bob Lay called the Litchfield County Times late Thursday afternoon and told the newspaper he and two friends saw exactly the same thing in the same spot 2 years ago around the same time. We looked at each other and said, "What the heck is that?" Mr. Lay recalled. Mr. Lay said it came out of the sky pretty much like a green blob. The whole horizon lit up, that weird green glow, and then that was it, said Mr. Lay. So that's the story. And I can say for a fact that you can see a lot of weird stuff out there, especially back in the day. Nowadays, there's a little bit more light pollution, but when I was younger, I had seen a lot of weird things up in the sky. This, to me, does not sound like a UFO. It sounds like a meteorite, even though it was green. So I've never really subscribed to the fact that it was a UFO. I think if it were, the entire lake would have been closed off. The military would have been in there. The lake at its deepest point is about 25 feet deep, so nothing could really hide in there. I mean, nothing large could really hide in there. It's a very rocky lake. It's a glacial lake, so tons of rocks and boulders, and you could be swimming 100 yards from shore and find a huge boulder and stand on it, and it looks like you're walking on water. So honestly, I don't think an alien spacecraft landed in Bantam Lake. It's a very interesting story. I think just for me personally, someone who's camped on the lake his entire life, knows the land, knows the peninsula like the back of my hand, and I'm going to bring up a photo of the peninsula here in a second, just with the map. But it's a small stretch of land. It's a large lake. I've seen a lot of strange things out there, but no craft could land in that lake and not be found. Again, it's not a very deep lake. You can go out easily, very far from shore, and you're still probably only about 10 feet of water, 15 feet of water. So let me pull up, just for anybody watching on video. So here we have the map, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see Point Folly here. It's a peninsula that just dips south into the lake, and I'm going to just kind of see if I can drop a pin right about where I camp. So here we have the map. So I can't, but right where my cursor is, our campsite's on the east side of the peninsula. And apparently from this show UFO Witness, that's where they're saying that the meteorite crash landed, is kind of just east of Point Folly and just west of Marsh Point. So if you're looking at a map of the lake, that's basically where they're saying it crashed. Now, on the show UFO Witness, they speak to the fire chief. He says his daughter lived on the lake at the time that this happened, and when the object passed overhead, it killed the power. So their power went out, all the lights went out. Once it crashed, I guess all the power came back on. So the hosts of this show, UFO Witness, were sort of saying that that is evidence that it might be a UFO. I strongly disagree with that. I feel like we don't know if UFOs even exist, so how do we know what behaviors they exhibit or what effects they would have on electricity or homes? The one interesting thing he did say was that when he got to the lake, there were tons of waves crashing on the shore, and it lasted a long time. And this is a very still lake. And even if you have a big motorboat going really fast, you will get some waves crashing on the shore, and they can get pretty big, but they last a minute or two. You know, it's a very large lake. It's a still lake. And so I did find that interesting. So it does prove that something fell into the lake. I don't think it proves that a UFO fell into the lake. So again, it's TV. You got to be careful about what you see on TV. They had also taken an EMF detector to the shoreline, and they got a few hits. And, you know, of course, that means there's a UFO in there. Again, it's a shallow lake, all things considered. It's very large area-wise, but depth 25 feet tops, and most places it's going to be about 10, 15 feet. I've been out in the raft, I've dropped anchor overboard, and you could be out real far and that anchor is going down about 8 feet, 10 feet, maybe 12 feet at some points. For the most part, it's a pretty shallow lake. If any alien craft fell in there, it would not be well hidden. And there's a lot of people living on the lake. People would have seen it. People would have seen military cordoning off the lake and using their equipment to go in and retrieve this crashed alien craft. So I'm not buying that this was a UFO. It was a UFO only in the fact that it was unidentified. We don't know what it was, but I'm pretty confident in saying that this was a meteor crashing into the lake. Very cool story, especially since this is almost like a second home for me. I've just been going there for so many years, have so many great memories of this place. It's just a family tradition to go every summer. And to know that something happened so close is really cool. And of course, if you play the name game, if you've followed Lauren Coleman in some of his books, he talks about the name game. And I'm going to scroll back up to my article because I kind of talk about this here. So I'm going to read from my article what I wrote. I always pay attention to place names, thanks to Lauren Coleman's name game discussion in his books, as they are usually interesting when it comes to the history of a town. A lich usually refers to a type of undead creature, from the German and Dutch words for corpse. So it's always been interesting for me knowing that Litchfield is a hotspot of paranormal activity. You have the Winstead Wild Man, which is a Bigfoot report from the 1800s. A lot of UFO sightings up there. Connecticut is rife with ghost stories. So it's always interesting to me to pay attention to these names. And again, if I had known this when I was much younger, I probably would have been much more frightened to camp there. But it's a really cool place to go and just relaxing. And I love being there. I love being on the lake. And it's just cool that something made the news. Again, not major news. A lot of people didn't even know this happened. People I know who know of Bantam Lake didn't know this happened. I just happen to know because I follow UFO news. And when a UFO allegedly crashes in a place that I'm very familiar with, I'm going to pay attention. So I did my blog post years ago, a little over 10 years ago now, and they're still talking about it on TV. Just now they started talking about it. But so the show was interesting, but again, I think they jumped to a few interesting conclusions that I don't agree with, that this is definitely a UFO. I don't think it was. I think it's a meteor. Whale-sized, I don't know what that means, or shaped. Very large, I'm guessing, larger than a car, but not much bigger. Otherwise, it would have done a lot more damage. So yeah, that was very cool, and I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about that, because that's where I was last week. There's going to be a video coming up on the YouTube channel. It's not a podcast. It's going to be a full video on just the little excursion me, my father, and my son took on our raft out to the bay off of Point Folly, near Camp Hope, so a little bit northeast of our campsite, because again, that's where the TV show said this thing allegedly crashed. So we went out there and we took an EMF detector, we took a magnet on a rope, and we were just trying to see what we could pull up from the lake bed. We picked up a screw and some rocks, and that was about it. Nothing extraterrestrial. So, but it was very cool. It was fun. We had a good time being out on the raft and on the lake, and just, towing my son behind in a smaller raft. And my dad was rowing, and I was doing my silly recording here. So that'll be a video on the YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out. And before I go, this is going to be a shorter video this week, shorter podcast, because I just, like I said, I'm very tired and had a lot going on this week. But I did want to talk about one weird encounter that I had on Bantam Lake. I've had a few, but this one is related because it's UFO. Back in college, and this involves my friend John, who was on the podcast last week. If you listened last week, he was telling some ghost stories, but we had a weird experience. He actually had some weird experiences at Bantam Lake too, so I want to get him on and talk about this story and some of the other stuff that he experienced on his own. But there was one night we were on Point Folly. We went down to the point of the peninsula, so the southernmost tip of the peninsula, and we were just kind of looking east, southeast, and there's a landmass out there. And this is a couple of years after he had started coming with me. And we were commenting because we saw a red light on the horizon, a little bit above the landmass, above the hill. And it was nighttime. It was probably 11 o'clock at night. And we were just sitting by the water, and we noticed a red light on the horizon. It wasn't blinking. It wasn't moving. No other lights to it. It was just a solid red light. Looked like the top light of a radio antenna or a water tower. And we had commented to each other how we didn't notice during the day that there were any towers out there, but we knew the surrounding areas were being built up, and there were bigger and bigger stores coming to town, and a little bit of a glow on the horizon from neighboring towns that hadn't been there in years past. And we were kind of lamenting the development of the area that, we're city boys, we're from Brooklyn. So coming up to Litchfield, Connecticut, Bantam, Connecticut, and just being able to see all the stars and the Milky Way, and it was great for us as kids. We were probably, at this point, he'd been coming for a few years, so we maybe were 20, 21. And we had seen this red light, and we were just sitting at the point on some rocks and talking about life, talking about school, talking about girls, talking about whatever was on our minds. And we sat there for about a half an hour, and then we noticed that this red light had then started to move. It had been there for about a half an hour, no blinking, no navigation lights, just a solid red light. And then it started moving. It started moving north, up towards the north side of the lake and towards our campsite. So we said, oh, we got to go back anyway. Let's see if we can follow this thing. And as we started walking, it started moving north faster and faster and faster. And the entire time, not a single blinking light, no navigation lights, no white lights. This was clearly not a plane. It was a solid red, and I'm not even talking like red tint. It was like a deep, deep red light. And it was low. It wasn't high up in the sky. It was low. Like I said, we thought it was a radio tower. It was that close to the horizon, the landmass across the way. It just looked like it was just barely peeking above the trees. And then as it started moving, it did look like it was getting higher, but it was just red, and it was big. Like I said, there was no way this was a plane that I could tell. There was no navigation lights. There was no sound. There was no jet engine noise, no propeller noise. And again, up there, we would hear planes going overhead all the time, even really high ones that look like little tiny pinpricks in the sky. You'd hear that go over, and then, a few seconds later, you'd hear the faint drone of a jet engine, especially at night, very quiet up there. So that was weird for us to see this pure red light with nothing else on it. And again, if we had seen it moving from the get-go, I would even then say it was a plane. But this thing just sat on the horizon for about a half an hour, and then it started moving. And that to us was very interesting, that we watched it for half an hour. We were just looking at it, kind of lamenting the development of the surrounding area. And then it started moving after about a half an hour. So I don't know any plane that could be coming towards you for a half an hour and not grow any bigger nor smaller, not move its position, and then suddenly just kind of dart off to the north very quickly. And we started walking back to our campsite, which is not very far. And this thing was gone by the time we got to our campsite, disappeared over the horizon. So still don't know what it was. UFO in that it was unidentified, because it could have been any number of things. Again, this is probably 20, and do the math again. We were maybe 21, we're 48 now. So you're looking at 27 years ago. I don't think people had drones. I don't know of anything that could be in the sky that didn't make noise. No engine noise, no propeller noise, nothing. So very interesting story. And I will have John on to talk about that in the future, because his memory is always better than mine. So I'm giving you a broad overview, and his details will probably help fill in some things here, because he remembers things better than I do. He's got a great memory, and I don't. So, but wanted to share that. I've seen a few other weird things out there. Again, I talked about this to Seth Breedlove on the first 2 episodes of this podcast, about how you spend enough time out in the outdoors, looking up at the sky, looking into the tree line, you're going to see some weird stuff. You're going to see stuff you can't explain. And I certainly did. So thank you for listening, everybody. And if you want to read more about Bantam Lake, it's very easy to Google. It's the largest lake in Connecticut. Just do Bantam, Connecticut. You'll find Bantam Lake. You'll clearly see Point Folly. And if you watch the video on YouTube, you'll see where I was pointing my cursor, where our campsites are at. And you can sort of get an idea of where this meteorite may have crashed, and you'll get an idea of where John and I were kind of seeing this red light and where it went to. So next week, I'll be back with a longer episode, hopefully some guests. Have a few things in the works and hope to have them on in the near future. And again, John will be back on. Josh Diaz will be back on. Scott Perry is going to be back on. So we got some good stuff coming up. Thanks again for listening, and check out our YouTube channel. Please give us a subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I'm going to put links to my blog in the description here, so you can go right to the blog post and read about this initial UFO, quote unquote, UFO story. Thanks again for listening, everybody. See you next week. Hey everybody, so here I am at Bantam Lake. Getting my tent set up for the evening. It's kind of glamping compared to what I usually do. Got a nice cushy air mattress. I got blankets, I got a pillow. Lots of stuff. Probably no chances of Bigfoot tonight. Too many people around. You can probably hear all the motorboats. It's a family campground. But be scanning the skies for UFOs tonight. Years ago, a meteorite fell into this lake. People were calling it a UFO. There was just a show on it. I forget the name of the show. My son just saw it. And it apparently crashed right outside of our campsite. Right in the lake. Right about there. So, that'll be cool to check out. Or later. Pretty cool. All right, we're out here on Bantam Lake, Connecticut, Litchfield, Connecticut. Back in 2012, there was an object that fell into the lake. Some people said it was a UFO. Other people said it was just a meteor. It apparently crashed back in this little bay back here. Our campsite is over there. You might see a little orange thing back there. We're taking EMF meter. We've got a magnet. It was recently on a TV show called UFO Witness.
Careful that, yeah. Careful that meter.
No, it's fine. It's cool. So I had blogged about this back in the day, probably back in 2012, because I've been camping here all my life. And it was pretty cool. He's pulling himself. Witnesses reported as a large green whale-shaped object that fell into the lake. And again, apparently it fell back in this bay here, which is what we're rowing to now. And we're going to try to take some EMF readings, drop the magnet, see if we pull up anything. Again, probably a meteorite, but still pretty cool that something fell. It was about 2 in the morning. A woman had seen it. A police officer came to investigate. It was on a show recently called UFO Witness. They did a story on it. So we're just heading out here now, trying to see what we can find. Probably nothing, but you never know. That's why you investigate.
Are you rowing?
My dad, Rowan. my son along for the ride, doing nothing as usual. Sorry, Jake. We'll keep trying. Let's see what we catch. Some other people on the lake with us. So back there is the south side of the peninsula. We're just heading to this bay out here. We're almost there, so. All right, so we're basically at the spot where we think this thing crashed. No display. But if I turn it off, if I turn it on, the batteries are working. I'm not getting a display. So I'm gonna take the batteries all out and try them again.
I got new batteries. I got a whole bunch.
Alright, I don't know if the camera's picking this up. I'm seeing a bit of a display. I don't know if it's just too bright out here.
Okay, Jake.
Change the batteries. Just see if we pick up anything. Some waves out here. Drop the magnet soon too, see if we catch anything.
Yeah. Hang on.
Send Jake back there bobbing like a cork.
Yeah, we should be right here.
Because they're not exactly sure where it fell, right?
No.
So. Okay, so of course, as I was not recording, we're getting some hits. Doesn't mean anything. Electromagnetic. Could just be any number of things, but still interesting. There's people on a motorboat out there having more fun.
Going back.
Okay. Go ahead.
What's that?
Something just tugged on the magnet real hard. Maybe it's gotten stuck in a rock.
Yeah.
Let's try it again.
We're gonna drift now.
It's actually not that deep here.
It's not.
Nah.
No drift.
Yeah, it's maybe like 5 feet.
I'm going back over here.
Okay.
Jake. Let me know when it gets deep and then we'll drift there.
Alright.
There's a buoy there, see that? We'll drift deeper there. Inside the channel. Let me know when you think it's deep again.
We got a few things.
Ooh.
We got screw. We got screwed.
Wow, really?
There's a little screw there.
Is it pretty deep here?
6, 7 feet.
That's it?
Yeah, there's a screw. See that? And we got some rocks, which are pretty magnetic. Let's see what else we can catch. Yeah. Well, we're not going to pull up a whole meteorite.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Pretty deep now? Deeper there?
Yeah, it's probably 6, 7, 8 feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, we're getting to like marshy area here. Well, let me see.
Well, we're at the zone, I think, now.
Yeah.
Let's drift.
All right, nothing on this one. So let's see.
I
1,
don't want to
2,
screw you. I'm
3,
something.
4, 5, 6, 7. Or about 7 feet, 7.5 feet. Yeah, you can check the screw. So that's the basin. I'm trying to find it. Let's see what we pulled up this time. I mean, those rocks are cool.
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah,
else has
last
been.
time,
Yeah,
pulled up a bunch.
yeah,
Is it deep enough?
yeah. Probably like 7, 8 feet.
Yeah.
Nothing here.
How could it have landed here?
Well, you just don't know where the. It's hard to tell where the,
Deep part of it.
where the deep parts are. You feel anything, bud?
What do you mean?
Any radiation? You getting any superpowers? Any aliens telepathically talking to you?
No.
No?
Gotta pee.
Not this time. You gotta pee though, huh?
Yeah.
Wanna head back?
So sometimes you're just sitting there waiting for stuff to happen. I caught some seaweed.
Gigantic seaweed.
Maybe it's from outer space. Little pod people.
It's alright.
It's definitely paranormal seaweed.
I saw it move.
Yeah. How could you have seaweed in a lake? That's cool. The meter went off a few times though.
Yeah, right.
Shouldn't be going off out here. Got my phone in airplane mode. I'm the only one with a phone out here. More sediment. Whole lots of nothing here.
Wow.
That might be your magnet.
Take it away and see.
Yeah, it's your magnet. Forget how strong that thing is.
Yeah.
Right, the magnet's probably about 10 feet underwater now.
Can't be the magnet.
No, the magnet's too far. It was barely doing it when I was touching the thing.
I'm trying to go over it again.
Yeah. You're right over it again, Jake. It likes you.
Nothing, right?
Give us the boy.
Nothing.
Now it's not now. I'm really curious if they send people out here to look for it.
Yeah.
Geologists or
I'm
something.
sure they did.
Scuba divers and such.
And the time we saw the scuba divers, that was longer than 2012.
Oh yeah, that was when I was a kid. Yeah, that was just at night. They scared the hell out of us because we were down by the lake.
What the heck is
Because
this?
they had the flashlights on underwater.
Yeah, oh, this thing, yeah, that was scary.
Yeah, because you see a light under the water. Yeah, what is that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
just
cool.
yeah. All right, so we've been using this magnet trying to get meteorites pulled up. We got nothing. A couple of little tiny rocks.
Minimals.
Little rocks. Probably not from outer space, sadly. We're gonna keep trying, then we're gonna go back for dinner. But it's beautiful out here today.
You want to be rolling?
everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. This is episode 33, and I'm joined once again by my frequent guest and co-host and guest co-host, I guess, at this point, my buddy John. Thanks for joining me again, brother.
Thank you for asking me again.
Oh, of course. We've teased this show in the past. We have lots of stories to tell of just weird things. And this week is no different. This week, we're going to talk about some high strangeness at Bantam Lake. And I've done a couple of videos on Bantam Lake so far, not my own experiences, but there was allegedly a UFO that crashed into the lake back in 2012. And I did a podcast episode on that, but I also did a YouTube video on that where on my last trip there this past summer, my father and my son and I all paddled out to the cove where this thing allegedly crashed, and has become a pretty popular video. So if you guys are interested in more Bantam Lake stuff, this is an episode for you. So we're going to talk about some weird things that John and I experienced up at Bantam Lake over the years, and we don't know what to make of them. So if you guys are listening and have thoughts, leave the comments below and let us know what you think. We're just here to tell the stories. We're not here to say what we saw definitively, just tell you what we saw. So I guess we'll start at the beginning. I'm going to share the screen here for anybody watching on YouTube and just give everybody just a little glimpse of Bantam Lake, and I'll do a little history. So Bantam Lake is the largest lake in Connecticut. I'm zooming out here a little bit so you can just kind of see where New York City is down here. Bantam Lake is up here. So west of Hartford, north of New Haven. So on the lake, there's a campground called Point Folly. And my family has been camping there since I was a little kid. And we'd go once or twice a summer and camp there. And we'd always camp on this eastern side of the lake, and our campsites were probably right about mid-peninsula here, where I'm circling with my cursor. The UFO that I was talking about allegedly crashed in this Kilbourne Cove here, so pretty close to where we camp. We weren't there when it allegedly crashed, so don't take anything from that.
So if you could just Kilbourne Cove and Point Folly. I mean, if something's going to happen, where is it going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the lake is huge. If I zoom out here, I mean, this thing could have crashed into the town. I mean, the town is right here north of the peninsula, and there's homes dotting the lake, a lot of summer homes. People are often on the lake motorboating and jet skiing and just having fun in the lake. This could have happened during the day. It could have easily, crashed on land and done some real damage. I don't think it was a UFO. The lake at its deepest point is 25 feet. On average is about 14 feet. We went out to Kilbourne Cove, and even like right in the middle here of the two land masses where we thought it would be deepest, I was dropping a magnet on a rope, and it was about 8 feet on average, 7-8 feet. So the first story I want to tell, so back in high school, as I said, my family would go on these vacations. So back in high school, when John and I first became friends, he started coming on the trips with us as a family friend, and he has mentioned before on the podcast that he kind of grew up around my family. In my family, came on vacations, was over many nights for dinner, many weekends. So he came on this trip with us.
Which I am very grateful for, all that time that I got to spend with your family. Always welcomed me, and it was always very special. Still very special memories that I have.
Yeah, it was great times. We loved having you around. My parents always still ask about you, and we've talked off air that we all have to hang out this summer. You got to come to my parents' house for one of our barbecues or something.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. So John started coming with us, and there was one year, and again, these things happened so long ago, over 30 years ago, where we were trying to off air pinpoint the year, and we think we narrowed it down to 1990. We were around 16, And I'm going to bring up the satellite view here. So our campsites, here's the bathrooms, and you kind of walk down a trail, and then our campsites are right about here. So right where this little crook in the road happens. So John and I had taken my little brother and his friend, Jeff and Andrea, down to the water. They wanted to throw rocks in the water. They were probably 5 or 6 at this time, and they were throwing rocks in the water. So we were down on this. The peninsula is raised, and you have to kind of scramble down some rocks. It's fairly steep and treacherous, but you can get down to the water. And then there was like a beachy area, and it's not sand as we know it. It's more of like a sandy sort of silt. And the kids were there just picking up rocks and throwing them into the water. Suddenly a pretty fierce storm rolled in. Lots of rain, thunder, lightning, just kind of out of nowhere, as it does when you're up in the mountains like this. And we wanted to get the kids back to safety, so we scrambled them back up the rocks, back to the camp. I was kind of helping my dad put some tarps on the tents. The storm was over in about 10 minutes. So just by the time everybody got the tents covered and shelter up to protect us from the rain had stopped and the storm had moved off and the sun was out again. So we all kind of laughed. And of course, the kids wanted to go back down and throw rocks in the lake again. So John and I took Jeff and Andrea back down to the water. And so again, about 10-15 minutes of time has elapsed. And this is not a big peninsula. I mean, you can see the dirt road here. Our campsites are right about here. You have the dirt road, you cross it, and right down in here. So when John and I got back down to the water, we noticed something really strange, and it's hard to describe. And at first, it doesn't sound like much, but the more we looked at it and spent time there, the more it bothered us. It was the sand again. Like I said, it was a very sort of smooth, silty, sandy beach, and the sand was wet, and then it was made even more wet from the rain. Obviously, it was a torrential downpour, so you had this completely soaked, wet sand. And right where we had been throwing the rocks, there was this fairly large gouge taken out of the sand, and it was, from what I can recall, probably a little over a foot to maybe 1.5 feet wide, and maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches deep, depending on where it was. And it had just looked like the sand had been sucked up out of the ground. Like it was just gone. And we were the only ones down there. And again, even at the time, in our 16-year-old minds, we were trying to figure out what could have caused this and trying to debunk this and say, well, not debunk it, just explain it and say, could somebody have, pulled a boat out of the water? And it would have been too small and narrow of a boat to get out of the water, maybe a jet ski, but there's no way anybody could have hauled a jet ski up those rocks. And again, this was right across from our campsite. We would have seen, even in the chaos of trying to throw the tarps up, we would have seen somebody hauling up a boat or a jet ski. It was just very weird. And again, you'd think if someone pulled a boat or a jet ski up, the sand would have been smooth. It would have made an indentation in the sand as the boat was dragged. But this had looked almost like, and John and I were talking about this off air, but it's almost as if you see a piece of concrete and somebody kind of chisels it out and just pulls it out, and the sand where it was missing was all jagged. And so it wasn't done with a shovel. We joked at the time that it almost looked like some sort of sea creature like reached onto the shore and like pulled its tentacle in, maybe trying to grab something from the shore. But we couldn't really explain it. And John, I know you mentioned off air that like it didn't even crumble. Like the sand, it was wet and it was fairly deep and fairly wide, but the sand hadn't like even crumbled back into the hole. It just, which you'd think would happen if someone or something had pulled the sand out. Like it was just almost as if something sucked the sand out or beamed it out. Like it was just missing. It was like missing sand, and there was no sand on either side of it. Like weird.
Yeah, it didn't seem to make any type of sense at all. I mean, especially with wet sand, it just collapses in on itself. And this was just missing. And it looked like it could have been normal if it were a rock. if it was just rock and someone had chiseled into the rock, but it was very clearly wet sand, and it was just all the sand was just missing. It was so, I mean, it almost seems completely ordinary, like you would never notice something like this, and yet super strange at the same time.
Yeah, and it was just one of those things that once we walked down there, and I remember we tried to get the kids out of there because we were kind of freaking out. We were just like, "What is this?" It was clearly noticeable, clearly visible, and again, I don't know what to make of this. I'm not saying this is paranormal or this was aliens or this was a lake monster. There's clearly no lake monster in Bantam Lake, but it was just really unsettling to just because again, you see it at first, and your mind at first is saying, "Oh, somebody pulled a boat out of here, or somebody was digging," and then your rational mind kicks in, and you say, "Well, this is our campsite. Nobody else was down there except us. Nobody could have gone down there and come back up without us seeing them. It wasn't a boat because it wasn't smooth. It didn't compress the sand. The sand was missing, and it was a lot of sand missing. Like I said, this was probably a foot and a half wide, an inch and a half to 2 inches deep, and probably 5 or 6 feet long. And it went into the water, which is why we kind of joked that like some sort of tentacle would come out of the water and just pulled it back in because it led into the water.
Yeah, it was definitely like a lake beast.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like, just that it was missing. And I think we threw around the idea that like, because there was a storm, like maybe lightning hit it, but
Right.
lightning strike is not going to make pounds and pounds and pounds of sand wet sand disappear. And we were gone from that site for all of 10 minutes. It really wasn't a long, it wasn't hours that we were gone. The rain came in, we ran up, we were trying to throw the tarps on, the sun came out, we all kind of laughed. My dad probably didn't see the humor in it as much because the tarps were huge. And it's a lot of work trying to get the tents all covered because it wasn't just his tent, it was like my tent and my brother's tent.
And if it were a lightning strike, I mean, we were, as you can see here, just really right across the road. If lightning struck at that distance, that would have given us a good scare.
Yeah, that would have been right. It would have been unmistakable. That would have been a bolt right in front of us, and it would have been loud, and it would have been super dangerous. I mean, it was torrential rain, and there was thunder and lightning, but the thunder and lightning were distant. I mean, which is why we were kind of scrambling to protect the campsite and get everything back in the car and get the kids inside. But there was no lightning strike right there. So it's always one of those things that bother me because it's as someone who's into the paranormal and the unexplained and such things, I don't even know how to classify that. Like, it's just one of those like Fortean things, like from Charles Fort, like frogs falling from the sky, or like weird things that seem to involve nature but are sort of unexplainable. Like, how do you have like frogs falling from the sky, or unless you go to like a biblical explanation. But it was just like this missing sand. And I think we did try to call my dad's attention to it, maybe some of the other adults there, and they're partying, they're camping, I don't think anybody paid much attention to it. My dad may have seen it and said, "Oh, that looks weird."
Yeah. That was it though.
That was it, but and again, it's just I understand, it's kids down there playing, and there's all right, there's a hole in the sand, and maybe you and I should have made a bigger deal out of it, but we didn't. At least not to anybody else. I mean, internally we were kind of freaking out. I remember we did try to get the kids away from there because it was just like, let's go to a different part of the lake and throw rocks, because this was weird. It looked, and again, I'm not saying that's what it was, but it looked as if something reached out an arm or a tentacle from the lake and smashed it on the beach and like dragged its claws, and just that sand was missing. But again, the sand around it was not disturbed. It was just like you said, it's almost like a rock, you have a big rock, and for whatever reason, the weather or someone chisels it, like just a section of that rock just pulls away. You have a brick, and it's this perfect brick, and you drop it and part of the brick cracks off, and now you have this gouge in the brick. that's what it looked like, because it was just wet sand, and it it was weird. It looked like something sucked it up or beamed it up or clawed it away, and it's just one of those weird Bantam Lake stories that has always stuck with me, and I've never been able to explain it. And as I said off the air to you, John, like if there's anybody out there, a naturalist, a biologist, anybody who can explain this phenomenon of why the sand would just disappear like that in a matter of minutes. There was nobody else down there. The kids weren't digging. There's all, pounds and pounds of sand are missing. And of course, over the next few hours, the waves from the lake kind of eroded it away, and it went away. But I remember we were just really disturbed by it at the time. So
It was really strange. I mean, I've never seen anything like that before or since. And I love vacationing on the Jersey Shore, and the sand does not behave like that. It's just very strange.
yeah, and I think that's what really got to us. It's one of those like real subtle things that your brain sees something, and at first you're just like, oh, okay. But there's like this little tickle in your head, and it just won't go away, and it's telling you there's something wrong about this. Like sand doesn't behave that way, and it wasn't a boat,
No.
it wasn't a shovel, it wasn't kids kind of kicking the sand or digging in the sand. I mean, everyone was accounted for, and I remember where my tent was at that time. I mean, it was my dad and I were facing the lake, and the little entry point down into that part of the lake shore. Like again, I would have seen anyone going down or coming up, because we used to be kind of, there's like an unspoken rule of camping there, is that the little pathways down to the lake in front of your campsites are yours. Like you don't go to someone else's campsite and go down to the lake from their campsite. It's rude. And us as city folk, from New York City and Brooklyn at the time, like anybody, and you probably remember this, just anybody who would kind of walk along and go down those steps down to the lake, like we'd all kind of, hey, what are you doing? There was a suspicion, there was kind of this territoriality. So it was almost like we were just hyper aware of anybody going down our entry points to the lake, down those little paths. And so again, I really feel like we would have noticed that. We would have noticed within those 10, 12, 15 minutes. I mean, it really wasn't a long time. We would have noticed somebody going down there or coming up from there. So, or, the other explanation is someone is walking along the shoreline from another campsite, decides to stop there in the middle of a violent thunderstorm, for some reason dig out the sand that way for reasons unknown, and then keep on walking back to there. I mean, it's just, and again, the shoreline is not easy to navigate. You have like little patches of beach here and there, but for the most part, and this is a glacial lake, this is a naturally formed glacial lake, there's rocks and boulders everywhere. I mean, you can easily twist an ankle. Just getting down to the lake can be difficult. And I remember you and I just kind of helping Jeff and Andrea down, just like, because they were little kids, and we'd go down and kind of pick them up and bring them down to the water. So again, not saying it's paranormal, just one of a few unusual things that John and I have experienced at Bantam Lake. So again, if anybody has any thoughts or ideas as to what this is or has an explanation, I would love to hear a normal explanation, because it's one of these things that kind of haunts me. Not terrifies me, but it's a little weird, and I just can't explain it. And again, even at the time, we just felt it was a little unsettling.
Yeah, it seems like a small thing, but we were 16 years old and we have never forgotten about it. To me, it almost seems that it would make sense if the sand in that area was frozen and someone took a chisel to it. That's the only way that it seems like it could happen. But, this was a summer vacation, so that doesn't seem that it was possible. But that's the only way that, looking back at it, how else could that have happened?
Yeah, and that's a good, I mean, that's what it looked like. It looked like just like if it was frozen or if it was concrete and someone just took a sledgehammer and broke out a path into the water and just took those chunks of sand or rock, if it was frozen or cement, and just taken those slabs and made off with them. Because again, the sand itself was gone. It wasn't compressed. It was missing. And there was no pile in the water. Like I remember we went down to the water just to see if there was, again, if something did drag the sand in, you'd think that there'd be a pile of that sand. The sand has to go somewhere.
Right.
And it's just like missing sand. So I don't know if this is a new Fortean phenomenon, missing sand, not missing time, but missing sand.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has experienced this or knows what may have caused this. We'd love to hear, because it would put our minds at ease. We're not looking for a paranormal explanation here. It's just a weird thing that happened, and we would love an explanation. So
yeah, agreed.
Is there anything I'm missing about that story before I move on?
No, that seems that matches up with my my memory of that afternoon pretty well.
All right, cool. So we'll move on to the next story that you and I share together, because then the story after that is really more your story. So this next story, this happened, we're having trouble with the date, but probably 93 or 94. So a couple of years later, because John did not come camping with us for too many years. It just wasn't really your jam.
Yeah, it wasn't a perfect fit.
It wasn't.
I have very good memories of it, spending time with you and your family, but it's not really my jam.
Yeah, it's not a lot of people's jam. It's like I said, these are the bathrooms here. I'll zoom in.
Yeah.
And it's basically a small building that with enclosed outhouses. I mean, it's there's no running water, there's no flushable toilets. And it's far from the, not far from the camp, but it's a little bit of a walk. And
yeah, I remember many a night walking up there in the dark and walking back.
Mm-hmm.
It's an experience.
It's an experience, and it's not for everybody. So I don't blame you for not coming anymore. I mean, most of my family doesn't go anymore, so it's down to like me, my dad, Neil, and Jake.
I did have fun when I was there, though, and like I said, good memories and some strange ones, as we were talking about.
Yeah, it was great times, but you did not come for many years. So again, we can kind of pinpoint when these things happened. And again, the first story I only know because Jeff and Andrea were little. They were 5 or 6. So
yeah,
we're 9 years older than they are. So that puts us at 15, 16, maybe 17. But I don't think we were even that old. I think we were probably around 16.
Yeah, I think so.
But this next story was, I believe, was maybe one of the last times you came, because again, we were talking off air, and we had said that the group that we had gone with, it was a bunch of different families and my cousins, and that group had kind of dwindled. And
yeah, we had 3 campsites, I think, at the beginning. So it was like we covered a vast area.
Right. It was like 3 big campsites, which funnily enough, we still get all 3 just to have privacy.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just like the 4 of us. It's just me, my dad, Neil, and Jake, and we still.
Yeah, there's a tree line that goes around.
Right, so it's kind of enclosed and it's nice. But back then, I mean, it was like a shanty town, because we had so many families coming and their kids and their friends, and it was like a little shanty town, back in those days. But this next story happened towards the later years when people were starting to get married, people were getting too cool for it, and the kids were getting older, they didn't want to come anymore. Some of the, like, I know my mom kind of dropped off. She was done with camping and using the outhouse and not showering for 3 or 4 days. So the next story, it was one night on the trip, John and I took a walk down to what we call the Point. And again, Point Folly is Point Folly, and it's a peninsula. And so the southern tip here, they call the Point. And there's campsites back here, but there's this little more open stretch of land here, and it's really nice. Some people come out here and sunbathe, and there's a beachy area right here. It's hard to see in the satellite image, but there's a beachy area right here, and there's some big rocks. So one night, John and I came down here just to kind of get away from the campfire and the music and the adults. And we were sitting on the rocks, and we noticed a red light, and it was out in this general area here, so out to the east. We couldn't tell how far away it was, but it was just a solid red light, kind of a little bit above the horizon. And when I was a kid, and even when John first started coming, the area around Bantam Lake was really not very well developed. I mean, there were homes, and there were little, it was a little town. And as time had gone on, as things happen, progression happens, and the town got built up, so there was more and more light pollution, and we could see the stars less and less. And we had seen this light, and we said, oh, it looks like somebody built some sort of radio tower or antenna, because all we could see was this red light, and it was a little bit above the horizon, and it just looked like any typical antenna, just with the red light on there to sort of warn off aircraft. And John and I were sitting down here at the point, talking and just watching this light, and it wasn't moving again, which is why we thought it was an antenna. And we were just talking about the things we talk about, probably music and girls and whatever teenagers talk about. And after, I forget how long it was, but it was probably anywhere between like 25 and 45 minutes. It was a long time. The light, which was stationary for on average about a half an hour, starts moving north. And we noticed it, and we said, okay, that's weird. Now this light is moving. And
Yeah,
again,
we
it's
noticed it immediately.
immediately.
Strange.
Right, because we're watching this and we're kind of complaining about modernization of the small because again, we're from the city where we light pollution galore, and buses and subways and trucks, and it was nice for us to get up there out of the city into the country and just see the stars and enjoy the nighttime sounds of crickets. And now you have things getting built up, and now there's this huge antenna out there and this big red light, and that sucks. And half hour later the light starts moving. So that freaked us out, and we're again not jumping to a UFO explanation. We're looking for running lights. We're looking for the navigation lights. There were no white lights on this. There was no red and green. It was just a very bright red light. Like I said, it looked like an antenna that wasn't even that far away. Again, it didn't look like it was necessarily on this shore right here, which is Marsh Point, but a little bit beyond that. So, what is that road? Allen White Road. So maybe out that far. We just thought it was an antenna. So John and I get up and we start following this thing because it's moving north, and our campsite is north. So we're heading back to our campsite, and we're walking along the dirt road, and this thing is just moving north, 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 north. And as John had said off,
to a jog at one point.
Yeah, we broke into a jog because we're trying to run along this dirt road, and there's trees along the shoreline here. So you have trees, you have a break in the trees, you have trees, you have a break in the trees. So we're trying to follow this thing before we made it back to camp. And this is not a long way here. This is a small building, and we were down here. And I mean, at a normal pace, this is maybe a 5-minute walk, if that.
Yeah.
I mean, not even that's at a leisurely pace from the point to our campsites over here. But yeah, we broke, we were just walking a little faster, breaking into a sprint. By the time we got back to the campsite, the light had passed this camp here, Camp Hope, and gone way up here into like Litchfield. So again, it was just one of those things, and nobody else had seen it. Everybody else was around the campfire. Again, there weren't many other people there that night anyway. The herd had kind of thinned out at that point, so no one else had seen it. But we told people when we got back, we saw this light, and we watched it for a good 20-30 minutes, if not more. And again, there was no cell phones back then. There was no, we didn't have cameras on us, or I don't even think we had watches. I didn't wear a watch back then. So I don't know.
No, me neither.
No one else had seen it, but we told people when we got back. But it was a long time. I remember we had like a lengthy conversation, and we watched it for a while. And it wasn't just a plane coming towards us that then veered off. We heard nothing. There was no engine sound.
No sounds at all.
Which again, up there it's fairly quiet. It's not the city, but even in the city, you see a light, you'll hear a sound, even if the plane is really high up. And this did not look to be high up. It did not look to be too far away. But this is in the time before drones. You're talking 29, 30 years ago, depending on how old we were. It could have been a prototype drone. It could have been a military craft. I mean, over the years, we've seen some military airplanes fly over, some A-10 Warthogs and things of that nature, but this thing made no sound. It was just a red light. It didn't blink. It didn't have any other lights on it. It sat there for much longer than any conventional aircraft should have, and then it just kind of zoomed off faster than we could keep up with it.
It was really fast.
Really fast. And again, we're not saying it's an alien spaceship, just UFO in the sense that it was unidentified and it was flying and it appeared to be an object. So a UFO in that sense. But yeah, we still don't know what it was, but it was just one of those weird experiences where we were not out there looking for anything. We weren't expecting anything. We were just talking, getting away from the adults, and saw this thing, commented on how it sucked that they're building up the area. There's this big antenna out there now, and then half hour later, the antenna decides to move. So it's very strange.
Yeah, very strange indeed.
So again, if anybody has any knowledge of military installations near Bantam that may have been testing, flying anything weird in the sky back in those days, so maybe early to mid 90s, we'd love to hear about it, because again, we don't know what it was.
Now that it's been declassified, of course.
Hopefully by now it would have been 30 years ago.
Mhm.
You would hope that it would be declassified, and that's what I'm saying. It could have been a drone prototype. It could have been something the military was testing and didn't think too many people would see it, and we saw it. So, and there really wasn't much of an internet back then, so it wasn't like we can go online and, hey, does anybody else report seeing anything, or could we make a report? We just kind of chalked it up to, okay, we're outdoors, we're looking at the night sky, and we saw something weird. So there you go.
Yeah, if we had phones, it would have been much different, because there would have been time to document what happened on the shore. We could have gotten something on video, but it was a different time, so missed opportunities.
Yeah. And again, we went up there kind of to disconnect, and not that we even had that stuff available to us, but even if we did, we probably would not have had, we probably would have had cell phones on us, but nothing else. But after we saw it starting to move, we could have maybe taken out our cameras, and again, what would we have caught? We would have caught a red light in the distance moving, which could be anything. Doesn't mean it's a ship from outer space or aliens or anything like that, but just an odd experience. And again, I've been camping there for years, and I'm not seeing UFOs every single time. I've been going there probably since I was 4 or 5. My parents started taking me there, and just every summer, sometimes twice a summer, especially when I was younger, we'd go once in July, once in August. And I remember even in the apartment, like between July and August, we used to keep all my dad's camping gear, the tents and the coolers and stuff, around the corner at my Aunt Polly's apartment building. She had a bin in the basement. But those years that we'd go twice, my dad would just keep the tents and the coolers and all the stuff in that hallway between the front 2 bedrooms and then the rear of the house. And you, like, just for that month, you're just kind of walking past in the hallway, just kind of turning to your side to walk past all the tents and the coolers and stuff. So yeah, there were some years we went, twice a year. So I've been up there a lot, and that was probably the only weird thing in the sky I've seen there. So it's not like it happened all the time, and we weren't looking for it that night, but we saw something.
Yeah, and then I saw something else sometime later. Unfortunately, you weren't with me that time.
And we believe this was a different trip, though, right? This was not the same trip.
Yeah.
because I think when you had this encounter, I think there were more people there. So I tend to think that this is sometime between the gouge in the sand and the red light that we saw. So maybe in like an intervening year. I don't know. I'm just guessing at this
Yeah.
point because it all kind of melds together for me now. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
No, no, it's fine. I was trying to wrap my head around what year it was as well. And I think you're right. I think it was in between those two things. And there was one particular night where I just wanted a little time by myself. That's the thing about camping, when you're with people, it's not like you can get away from them. And I love your family, but I just wanted a little, just stretch my legs, breathe in the night air, whatever. So I go down to the shore and I look up at the sky and there was no moon, so it wasn't particularly bright out. A couple of stars here and there. But in the distance, I do see several red lights. And, I didn't think anything of it at the time because, I'm a city boy. So I don't know what is supposed to be up in the sky. I don't know what color and, things appear because of pollution or anything like that. So it's like I just figured they were stars. At some point, they started to move, and not in the way that we saw later. What we saw was just still, and then it bolts in one direction. Uh, these other red lights that I saw were still at the very beginning, and not for half an hour. I mean, it was much less. Maybe like I looked up, I saw them. It's like, oh, look at these red lights. But then I saw them start to move around in all sorts of directions. And I don't, to this day, I don't know what it was. Um, I don't know if it was related to what we saw later on, but it certainly left an impression. I've never seen anything like that since. And I know we're talking about this other incident, but the other incident was still and then moving in one direction. This was just they're going all around. And I don't know, you could probably imagine fireflies doing something like that. But this was not fireflies. This was at a great distance where I believed what I was looking at the very beginning were stars. And then they just start moving around, and it's like they're dancing around up in the sky. And I've mentioned this before. I've never been, while I lay no judgment on this, I've never been into drugs or, getting altered in any sort of way. So I was in my right mind just by the shore, minding my own business, and I started seeing something that was very strange in the night sky. And again, like you were saying, I don't know what it was. It's just something that I saw that is unexplained.
yeah, and I remember you telling me when you saw, like, because you went down there and you came back, and we're friends. I could tell that you were disturbed by what you had seen. You weren't thrilled about it, as is often the case when people see things they can't explain and startle them. And I just remember you talking about how they were just kind of like dancing around each other and just moving in like these weird ways. And again, I mentioned earlier, like when we first started going up there, there wasn't much light pollution. We could see satellites. We could see the Milky Way on clear nights. Most of the times we went up there, we did not have a full moon.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that when we were there.
Yeah, there was only a couple of rare occasions that we did go up there, and I don't know if you were there for any of those times. I don't recall you
No.
being there because when there was a full moon, because again, back then it would be very dark. Now, I mean, I was just up there last summer, and there's so much light pollution. It's better than here in the city, but it's not like it used to be. It used to be able to see like just you could see the Milky Way. You could see, like I said, you'd see satellites. You'd see shooting stars every 30 seconds up there. It was just so dark. And when there was a full moon,
All of that was entirely new to me. I had never seen something like that. So that's when I saw them originally, I just thought, oh, that's just something I'm not used to seeing. And then they started moving around, which like I thought to myself, well, I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and we used to, sit around the campfire or whatever, and we'd look up in the sky and see the satellites, and you could see them, and they'd be just so tiny, and they'd look like a really distant star, but they'd be moving. But again, it would be in a very fluid, straight line. It's satellites don't dance; they orbit, so they're just moving as they move. And you'd see satellites, you'd see some planes high up in the atmosphere. Again, we'd see a lot of shooting stars. You just see the streaks, which again, these days you can still see, but it's not like it was 20, 30 years ago. I mean, just the light pollution, the areas around Bantam Lake have been built up, and even on the horizon now, you can see the glow of the different towns. If you stand on different parts of the lake, you can, oh, there's that town and there's this town, and you just see that glow on the horizon. And I do miss the old days because it used to just be so nice up there, and it still is. Just you don't get the view of the sky that you used to. So for you to see something moving around like that, at night and high up, I mean, you thought they were stars. This is not something close. These are not helicopters just dancing around each other. And I remember you specifically saying they seem to almost be like chasing each other or playing with each other. They were just kind of. Do you remember how many lights there were? I know.
I would say there were about no more than 5. So I mean, I guess that's a lot.
Yeah.
With. And I remember going up there. It was the first time I saw a satellite. Showed me what that a satellite was going by, shooting stars. I mean, I'm like a big time city boy. I had never seen those things before. So innocently looking up, that's what I thought at first, and then they just started moving around and seemingly sort of interacting with each other. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was seeing. So of course, I told you, which is what I do. I see something strange and I tell you. And, later on, you could usually tell me what it was, but at that point, you didn't know what it was either.
Yeah, and I still don't. I don't know what they could have been. Did you see them fly off, or like how did your experience end? Like you saw them, they were still, then they started kind of dancing with each other, and then do you remember how that ended?
They basically sort of faded away. So there was a light. I mean, they were definitely not close. It wasn't helicopters or anything like that. They were off at a great distance, and I thought they were stars, and I could see that they were moving around, interacting with each other, and then they sort of just faded into just the night sky. And that's when I came back up.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very weird, very interesting. Again, even that other red light we saw, I'm open to that being like a drone or a military craft because it seemed to do things that, we can do here, as far as hovering and then flying off in a straight line. And it wasn't, it moved fast, but it wasn't like warp speed. It wasn't, some people have a UFO experience and they say they see something and it's hovering, and then boom, it just, blink of an eye, it shoots off and it's gone. Like that's not what we saw with that red light. It moved quickly.
Right.
I would say faster than a plane, but not inhumanly fast. Just faster than a commercial aircraft would typically fly, I would say. But what you're seeing, if it's that high up, because again, the red light we saw seemed distant, but not. There would be no mistaking it for a star. Like it was way too bright. Again, we thought it was a radio tower a mile or two away. Like if even a mile or two away.
Across that little bit of lake right there.
Right, which half mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile tops. I mean, it just looked like a big red light on top of a radio antenna, and then it moved. What you're saying is that you kind of saw stars, which are much higher up there, and probably far less noticeable by anyone on the ground. Again, most people are camping at night. They're going to be around a campfire. They're going to be talking and listening to music and maybe drinking and eating. And anybody who lives up there is probably inside watching TV. Very few people are probably out looking up at the night sky. I mean, you're down by the water. You're away from any campfire light. You had your light off, your flashlight. and you're just kind of looking at the night sky and appreciating it, because like you said, like, we're city boys, you know, we don't get that view too often, so when we're up there we do enjoy it. And then you see like these red stars that just kind of start dancing with each other and interacting, and again, that would be weird for any human built aircraft to do,
Yeah.
because that's dangerous.
Yeah, I don't think that anything artificial could make those movements.
And again, fireflies, you know, lightning bugs, whatever you want to call them, I mean, they typically hang out around our level. You know, they don't.
Yeah.
And I've seen some of them up pretty high, you know, close to treetops, but not too often. And they're not usually red. They're usually a gold color. I've seen blue ones out in Gettysburg, which can be weird, because you just walking through the woods at night and you see blue lights, you know, roaming through the woods, and you know, here in New York City, all the fireflies are like an amber sort of color, yellowish sort of color.
I've never seen blue ones. That would be interesting to see.
Oh, they're beautiful, but a little startling at first, because you're not expecting them, and you just, you know, if you're in the dark in Gettysburg and you see something, you know, blue light moving through the woods, you're like, oh man, what am I seeing?
Awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. Then you're like, oh, it's just, you know, it's a firefly, but it's blue instead of yellow like we have here. So, but I've never heard of red ones, and to be that high up just seems weird. Like, and I think you would be able to tell the difference between like bugs and, you know, something that you initially mistook for stars.
Yeah, it was really strange.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not claiming that it was UFOs either. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, and that's, I've actually gotten comments on this channel, because people keep questioning me, and they say, well, why don't you say evidence? Why don't you say what it is, you know? And I don't like using the word evidence, because I did a show 2 weeks ago about the matron's house where we had the footsteps, and I wouldn't call it evidence. And I had a few people separately who don't know each other sort of question me about that and say, why do you avoid calling it, like, isn't it evidence? And I'm like, I don't like using evidence in this context. Like, perhaps it is evidence, it's not proof, but I think in the paranormal field, a lot of times when you say evidence, people hear proof, and I don't want to confuse anybody. I mean, I'm fairly skeptical. I've had enough of my own experiences, as have you. I like to think that we are both pragmatic people, practical people, reasonable, logical people.
Yeah.
But when we have experiences we can't explain, that's how I like to say it. It's an experience. It's something I can't explain. I can't currently explain it. I'm never going to say I saw an alien spaceship, or I saw a ghost, or I saw Bigfoot, or I saw whatever. Like, I just don't know, you know, unless I have that experience where a flying saucer lands and the alien beings come out and take me on their ship and say, welcome to our UFO. Like, I'm not going to say that that's what I saw was a UFO in the traditional sense. Again, unidentified, yes. Flying, yes. Object, yes. It's a UFO in that sense, but not in the sense that most people take it as, is, oh, it's UFO equals alien spaceship. I don't know what it was. It could have been a military craft. It could have been an experimental drone. It could have been any number of things. Same thing with the gouge in the sand. It could be a completely natural phenomenon that we just don't know about because we're not smart enough. We're not marine biologists, or maybe just scientists in general don't know about it yet. Maybe it's just a naturally occurring thing that we just haven't documented yet. So it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything paranormal, but it's just it's a weird experience. It's strange.
Yeah. Yeah. Proof is it seems like such a dangerous word in this field. I mean, proof sounds more like math. It sounds more like science. With this, proof of what? You know, we've had strange experiences. We've seen strange things, heard strange things, and we don't know what they are. It's just something that happened to us.
Right. And it's all anecdotal at this point. You know, it's even if we did have, like I said, even if we did have video of that red UFO, if we did have cell phones back then, what do we really have? We have video of a red light that could be any number
Right.
of things, because it's nighttime and it's the contrast and it's doesn't matter how much you zoom in, it's a red light against a black nighttime background. Um, the footsteps that I put in the episode 2 episodes back, it's just footsteps. And I can swear up and down that we were the only people in that building, but any objective observer is going to say he could easily have faked that. He could easily have been hoaxed. Like maybe there was somebody hiding in the building. Maybe so. And I don't know. Maybe there was somebody hiding in the building. For all I know, there was nobody else in there. We searched the building. We were locked in. But that's just my word, and I'm just some guy on the internet. So is it proof? No, of course it's not proof. It may be proof to me. It may in my heart of hearts, I can say, hey, that was an unexplainable experience for me. That's proof enough for me, but I can't convince anybody else of that because they're going to poke holes in it, and rightfully so.
Right.
And same thing with these experiences. It's I'm not saying they're paranormal. I'm just calling them high strangeness because they're just weird things that happened that you and I can't explain. I don't know what to make of them. The sand thing, I don't even know how to categorize that. The other two, you can put it in the UFO category just because they're unexplained. And they're flying.
Something flying around up in the sky.
Right. Unidentified, flying in the sky objects. So not saying they're alien, but maybe military, maybe natural phenomena we don't understand yet. Maybe.
Yeah, if we had to classify them, I would say the first one, perhaps military, the second one, some natural phenomenon that we don't know.
Right.
Know about.
Yeah. Earth lightning, ball lightning. There's all sorts of
Exactly
things that we know to exist, but that are very hard to replicate. They're very rare phenomena. They're very misunderstood phenomena because we just haven't observed them enough yet to sort of say, okay, this is definitively ball lightning, or and again, it may be not ball lightning, but something along those lines of, like you said, a natural phenomena that we just don't understand yet. So, but
the experiences that we have had haven't been replicated. They've all been unique, even if they are like red lights in the sky. They're doing different things. The only thing I think that consistently happened, we talked about in a previous episode, in episode 20, when we were talking about your guest room or your grandparents' guest room, where several things happened to several people. But everything else is actually pretty unique, unexplained, odd. And we're not saying that it's UFOs or paranormal. It's just we can't explain them.
Right. And again, there are experiences that we wouldn't have had if you and I had stayed at the campfire that night and didn't go down to the point. We probably wouldn't have noticed this.
Yeah.
Same thing with you going down to the water. If you didn't go, need a break from, because again, at that point it was a large group. They're probably playing the radio, probably, tunes that we weren't really into. And you were just kind of saying, hey, I need 10 minutes just by myself. And if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have seen what you saw. Same thing for the sand gouge. If we could have not been throwing rocks at that moment. Maybe after the storm, the kids said, hey, we don't want to go throw rocks anymore. Now we want to go play Frisbee. And by the time we did go back down to that part of the beach, whatever was there would have eroded away. We never even would have noticed it.
It's really just by chance. I mean, that these things have happened to us, I would say, especially in Bantam Lake. And you're right. I mean, had we stayed by the fire that one night, we might have never seen that because we never saw it before or since.
Right.
And the same thing with what I saw. Have never seen that before or since. So completely by chance.
Yeah. Like I said, just doing something a little bit differently or a little bit earlier in the night or later in the night or the next night or the night before could have totally changed those experiences. So,
and they were all fairly, my experience was fairly quick. When we both saw that red light, it was up there for a while.
Yeah.
That was odd. And then it moved off fairly quickly, but it was there for a while. we had a long conversation. God knows about what, but we had a long conversation about something.
Right.
I like to think we were talking about, Ronnie James Dio. I don't know why. Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
Holy
that's
diver.
that's. I hope that's what we were talking about.
I'm sure we were.
Rainbow and Black Sabbath, and good stuff like that.
Dehumanizer probably just came out shortly before that.
Oh yeah, Dehumanizer. What a great record. So underrated and just way ahead of its time.
Oh, yeah.
Magnificent record.
Yeah, so but that's what we would talk about back then, and again, it wasn't something we were looking for. We weren't looking for UFOs, and a lot of people
looking for anything.
Yeah, we just thought it was a radio antenna. So, so one last quick little story before we wrap up for tonight, and I sent this to you in the notes before, but there was one time before you started coming. My dad and I were down at the water at Bantam Lake. And like I mentioned, it's a glacial lake, so there's a lot of big rocks and boulders down there. So we went down one time, probably to fish or to swim or whatever, and there was a starfish on one of the rocks. Fresh, it wasn't dead. It didn't look too lively, but there it was. And we're looking at it. My dad's like, starfish don't live in fresh water, and I've Googled this, and they don't. Except, and this is a freshwater lake, far from an ocean. Again, I'll zoom out here, and it's not inconceivable that somebody was at the ocean. I don't know if you're finding many starfish in Long Island Sound or up in Cape Cod, but then you're talking a couple of hours drive to Bantam Lake, and again, not inconceivable that a child took home a pet starfish, in a bucket of salt water, brought it to Bantam Lake, and decided to place it in Bantam Lake. But it was just a very odd thing to see, a starfish in a freshwater lake. And I think even at the time, my dad and I kind of joked, like, oh, it's some sort of alien creature, and maybe we shouldn't go near it.
It's the thing that made the gouge.
Yeah, it grew up into a large starfish, and didn't like us throwing rocks at it. So during the storm, I was like, "Stop it!" and gouged out the. Yeah,
it meant to get us, but it's a starfish, so it was very super slow.
They were super slow.
We left, and it's like, oh, I missed my chance. And then it retreated.
That is a good theory. I didn't even connect those two earlier, but
yeah, it matches the timeline. Before we started going, and then we were both there, and we're throwing rocks at the thing. Of course, it's going to be angry.
Yeah, that's the only theory that makes sense. We've solved it.
We just solved it.
We just solved it. It's a giant, freakish, mutant freshwater starfish of Bantam Lake. But yeah, that always stuck out to me too, to seeing the starfish there. It's just, again, one of like those weird things that just sticks with you, that is probably completely innocent, but it always just kind of, it always occupies space in some deep recess of your brain of like, remember that starfish we found at the lake? What the hell was that about?
Yeah, it's just, you can't let it go for some reason. And it's not like you obsess over it, but it's like, it's back there somewhere. And then it comes up every once in a while. That was pretty odd.
Yeah. So lots of weird things, but I figured I'd end on that little funny note. And then you tied it all together. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so there we
awesome. Go. Have I missed anything?
No, I think that's those were all the things that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
For Bantam Lake anyway, for the times that I'm sort of affiliated with. Like, starfish happened before me, but everything else was around the time, like a 4 or 5 year stretch when I started going with you guys. No, I think that's those were all the things that we.
Yeah, I'll tell one more story, and this is after you stop. This is after you stop coming. So this was, God, it had to be probably 2011 or 2012. So it was me, my father, Neil, Jake, Neil's wife, Lynn, and Laura. And we're sitting around the campfire one night, and I think Jake had already passed out, but we see these orange lights coming from the west, and going towards the east. And we're all seeing them, like, what the hell is that? So there's one, then there's a second one, there's a third one, and they're just floating like very slowly. Just orange lights. They're flickering. Again, no other navigation lights or blinking lights or anything. And then they came closer to us. And we realized they were Chinese lanterns.
Oh,
So, but they were the freakiest looking thing. Like when
yeah.
because the middle of the peninsula is just kind of all wooded. So they kind of just come out of the woods. There's just these orange lights that a little bit above the treetops. They're not too much higher, but they're not in the trees, but they're not much higher than the treetops. And it's just, we weren't even thinking UFOs. It just like it was like something out of Poltergeist, like when the lights come down the stairs.
Yeah.
It was just freaky like that there was just one, and then there's another one, and then there's a third one, and they're just like coming towards us, and we're like, what the actual fuck is going on right now? And then as they got closer, we could see that they were just, it was flame, and they were just Chinese lanterns. But freaky story. But again, just to show that like not everything that happens up there is weird. I'm not trying to say that Bantam Lake is haunted or paranormal or I've said this on the podcast a few times before. Like, you spend enough time outdoors and you look into the sky, you look into the woods, you're going to see some weird stuff sooner or later.
Yeah, it'll happen.
It'll happen. And again, doesn't mean it's paranormal, but you're going to see things that you don't recognize, that you can't explain, and that will startle you, freak you out a little bit. So figured I'd throw that last story in there because we thought we were having another UFO encounter, and it just turned out to be Chinese lanterns.
Yeah, I'm sure it was really beautiful.
Oh, they were, once we figured out what they were. But at first we were just like, what the hell is happening here? Very strange. All right, brother. Well, again, I thank you for joining me. This was a good episode.
Thank you for asking.
It's always good to have corroboration on some of my wacky stories.
Yeah, that's always good.
Yeah, it's not just me telling stories that no one else was there for.
Right.
But the fact that you experience, especially the sand gouge, that's a hard one to explain to people. Hard one to explain at all. And
you know what? I think we need to expand our friend group. So if there are any marine biologists out there, physicists, we need your help because we're down in natural world.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone can explain this stuff, we'd love to hear your theories or your explanations. If you can definitively tell us what that was, we'd love to hear it. Again, the lights, probably not. I'm guessing that's subjective, but the sand thing, if anybody knows what that is, we'd love to hear.
Yeah. Oh, and ball lightning. If I could ever see ball lightning, that would make my year, my decade. I've been reading about that for years, and to actually see it would be something.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So I think we're going to wrap up here. But thank you again, brother. We'll do more shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want you on again. We got more stuff to talk about. And but yeah, I appreciate you coming on and reminiscing. And we will talk. Yeah, definitely. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care, brother.
Man. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. We're going to wrap up here. But thank you again, brother. All right. I want to thank my friend John for coming on once again, guest hosting with me and sharing some stories that we experienced together up at Bantam Lake. Definitely weird stuff. Again, high strangeness. Not sure it's paranormal. Not sure that the UFOs are alien spacecraft. Probably drones. Maybe natural phenomenon. What do you guys think? Leave the comments below. Some shout outs. Lovely Rebecca, Christy, Josh, Scott. Thank you guys. You guys always help me out in a pinch, and show's nothing without you guys. Stephanie, Lori. Lori comments a lot on YouTube. So Lori, thank you for being a listener. And we'll see you guys next week. Hopefully next week I have the On Location show. We didn't go this week because the weather conditions were terrible. I'm recording this on February 3rd. And it is very cold here in New York City, but upstate New York, the wind chills are insane. I think up in the Adirondacks and the high peaks, like up on Whiteface Mountain, it's like negative 71 degrees wind chill and like negative 40 just regular temperature. So Josh and I postponed our camping trip for this week. We're going to go next week, and hopefully we have a nice campfire chat podcast for you guys. So until then, stick around. Have a great week, everybody, and rock and roll.
Moonlight glowing, it fades. see your path. He glanced at me and then feedback. There in that moment, time was standing still. She wondered if he loved her, and he forever will. Please take all this pain, please take it all away. Like darkness of the night, it fades in the moonlight. Please take all this pain, please take it all away. The darkness of the night, it fades in the moonlight.
It will not.
You lie very well.
Ghosts surround you everywhere. Wait until you meet them there. In my dreams, I see your path. He glanced at me and then feedback.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, I'm doing some revisiting of some Connecticut strangeness. Specifically, if you've seen the title of this video, UFOs in Connecticut. And I'm going to be discussing three separate cases of very famous UFO sightings in Connecticut. But before I get to that, I just want to talk a little bit about some personal stuff that brought me to this for this week's episode. And you'll notice I'm wearing my Happy Camper hat for this episode, and I'm not a happy camper. I mentioned a few weeks ago on one of the podcasts that I was going on vacation. I was going back to Bantam Lake, and we were going to do some camping. Myself, my dad, my son, my Uncle Neil, and we were supposed to go for like 4 nights. We always do that every year. We try to get up there. But this year there was a little fly in the ointment. So I'm going to tell this story just because it's funny and therapeutic for me to tell it. So, and I'll tell you kind of how I got to this week's story. So we decided to go. We went up on Monday. I believe that was August 15th. So we went up on Monday. The weather forecast looked pretty good. There was a slight chance of rain for that afternoon. And I think, again, maybe Tuesday morning, there was like a 50% chance of like a passing shower. So we said, yeah, let's go up. It's a 3-hour drive. So we, packed up the cars, left early, got up there, set up our camp. Tents went up very nice. I went into town. I got some provisions, ice and charcoal and all that good stuff. Our wood guy, Steve, who was supposed to come Tuesday morning, couldn't make it. So he says, hey, I'm going to send out my friend to drop off your wood Monday night. So guy comes with the wood Monday night, a quarter cord of wood. So for like 3 nights, a lot of wood. We like to go usually late into the night with our campfires and build them up, and $100 later, a quarter cord of wood. I had brought some wood too from one of my previous camping trips that we didn't use, so I had like 3 bundles of wood plus this quarter cord, so a lot of wood. So we get up there, we have dinner. As the night is going on, the weather forecast is changing, and now for Litchfield and Bantam, Connecticut, we were up at Bantam Lake. They're calling for a flood watch overnight. So now we're getting a little nervous. The weather up there tends to be very iffy. I mean, there's been years we've canceled the entire trip because they called for rain all day, every day. And then we stay here in New York and we watch the weather and it's just sunny, sunny, sunny. Like the rain just never showed up, but we cancel the trip and we miss out on a good trip. And then other times the weather says sunny, 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 and we go up there and we get rained out. So a lot of that. And then there's been times we've had to leave a day early. Last year was great. We stayed the entire time, and we're very appreciative of that. You know, we had a great trip, a lot of swimming, a lot of cool campfires, a lot of stars in the night sky. And I'll link to an episode from last year that you guys can kind of see. We went looking for the Bantam Lake UFO, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit here. So anyway, we have our campfire and it's cloudy, but not raining. And then at certain points, it like starts drizzling here or there very lightly, but nothing too bad. You know, so we throw the tarps over the tents, and my dad covers his tent with a huge tarp, and the tarp that I got was slightly bigger than the footprint of my tent. So it covered it, but not the whole tent. And we'll get back to that. So we go to bed, and my son and I just fall asleep very quickly. It was just so comfortable. We have the air mattresses. I mean, this is kind of glamping. It's not really what like Josh and I do up in the Adirondacks, which is, you know, deep woods, sort of primitive camping. This is car camping, glamping. You know, we had air mattresses and pillows and blankets and just very comfortable. So, you know, later in the night, probably 1:30 in the morning, the rain is just coming down torrentially. It's probably the hardest rain I've experienced up there since I was a kid. It was just coming down nonstop, pouring rain. And I'm checking the tent, and so far I was dry at about 1:30 in the morning. No water coming in. And I was just hoping that the rain would ease up and then we'd be okay. It did not happen. So it kept raining. I wake up again about 4 in the morning, and now I have water in my tent. So there's a puddle down kind of at the front of the tent, the front corner near my air mattress. And because my air mattress is up against the walls of the tent, it's getting moisture on it because the water's coming in from the walls of the tent. So I'm looking around and I say, what can I do? You know, it's raining. It's pouring. I'm not snoring, but my son was sound asleep, and I moved my air mattress away from the walls of the tent. His air mattress looked dry, so I said, oh, okay, you know, he'll be okay. I picked up our bags because our bags are starting to get wet from the puddle on the floor, and I put them on our air mattresses. And I lay there, and I'm just listening to the rain. And like 20 minutes later, the right corner of my tent collapses. You know, I hear the wind really just picked up, and it was flapping my tarp. And for a brief moment, I thought my father and my uncle had gotten up and were throwing another tarp over my tent, because that's just the type of guy my dad is. You know, he's just always looking out for us with the tarps. And I thought it was him because it just sounded like somebody was flapping a tarp and trying to throw it over my tent. And then I realized it was the wind, and the wind knocks down the right front corner of my tent, and it just kind of collapses. So now I'm like, all right, I have to get up and fix this because this is not my dad, unfortunately. Now, it was very warm that night, so I'm sleeping in nothing but my briefs. So little image for the ladies there. So I get up and I slip on my brown Timberland sandals, and I have a poncho, and it's one of these cheap, like $1.99 ponchos you get from Walmart. It's basically cellophane in the rough approximation of a hoodie. So I throw that on, I throw on my headlamp, and I go outside. So I'm just in my underwear and the cellophane clear see-through poncho, headlamp, and, you know, brown slippers, sandals. And I go outside and I right the tent, you know, I put it back up, I stake it down, seam secure. So I go back inside, take off the wet poncho, take off the wet slippers, get back into bed. The rain is not letting up. It is just pouring rain. So 10 minutes later, the tent collapses again. So I got to put everything back on again, my clear cellophane poncho that's wet now, and my sandals and my headlamp, and I go back outside. And I'm trying to right the tent, and I'm like, okay, well, at least it's, you know, 4:30 in the morning. No one's going to see me. Of course, now I see headlights coming down. Somebody is driving at 4:30 in the morning through Bantam Lake campgrounds, Point Folly, probably retreating. They probably just got, rained out and we're going home or going to a hotel. But mysterious Bantam Lake driver, if you saw me, you probably have pictures. I don't know, but not a sight to see. Sorry. So I'm sorry if you had to see that. So I fix the tent again. I go back inside. It happens the third time. Collapses. Now my son wakes up and he sees me and he's telling me the story of the next day, of the image of me just in my sandals and nothing but my underwear and this clear cellophane, Reynolds wrap sort of cling wrap poncho and my bright headlamp. And at this point, I'm, my dad hears me from his tent and he's like, "You got water?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yep, told you so." So, Dad, you were right. You're still king camper. I should have gotten a bigger tarp. I learned my lesson. But anyway, my son and I get up out of bed. We run to the car and we finish sleeping in the car. And it just keeps raining and raining and raining. And it probably didn't let up until 9:30 in the morning or so. And then we got out and my tent is just full of water. Our blankets and pillows are soaked. Our bags are soaked. Our clothes are soaked. Everything in my tent is just like kind of a complete loss. And we're checking the weather and it's supposed to rain on and off all day. No sun. The high is supposed to be like 62. And that's the forecast for the next couple of days. I'm like, we can't even put our stuff out and dry out and at least salvage this trip. Like, we're just going to be wet the entire time. It's not going to get any better. So we woke up and we decided to pack up, and my tent was a loss. I had to cut a hole in the bottom just to drain the water. There was so much water in it, and it was an older tent. I'll buy a new one. It's probably over 20 years old at this point. I mean, I liked the tent, but I can probably get something a little lighter and more modern. But Dad, I know you're listening. You were right. I'm going to get a bigger tarp for next year. You were right. And you are king camper and you still have that title. So, but anyway, my plan was to do a revisit of the Bantam Lake stuff, because I've done some videos for this channel, both in podcast form, like with John on my own. And I also did like some bonus videos just for the YouTube channel for the Adirondacks, ODD, section of my site, where it's all just me just camping, usually in the Adirondacks, but I threw in a Bantam Lake video. So I was going to like record a podcast up there. I was going to do some bonus content, but we had to get up the next morning and just leave. My dad's back was hurting. Everything was wet. Even even with his super tarp, he still got a little bit of water in their tent. And it's just not fun camping out there when it's going to rain all day. And it rained the whole way home. It's tough to have a fire. It's tough to cook. It's tough to just sit out and enjoy. So yeah, we had a bail on that. So there's your horrifying story of our camping trip, and the horrifying image of me being nearly naked, just in my underwear and this clear cellophane poncho and a giant headlamp and my bulky brown slippers, just trying to right my tent at 5 a.m. as somebody drove by the campground. So there's that. So I said, you know what? I'm still going to do a Bantam episode. I still want to do something about Connecticut, because I do enjoy Bantam Lake. I do enjoy Connecticut. So I'm going to talk about some UFO stories today. Before we go any further, I just want to give a shout out to my buddy Andy from Spooky Island Radio. Great podcast. I listen to it all the time. I've mentioned him on the show many times before, but he had a little health scare last week. He was in the hospital, or almost 2 weeks ago now by the time this gets published. But he had a little health scare, went to the hospital. Turned out just to be like upper respiratory infection, but I'm glad he's on the mend. So Andy, buddy, get well soon. Hopefully you're better by the time you hear this. But, just know I've been thinking about you, and, I'm glad you're okay. So there's that. I want to give another shout out to my friend Courtney Maroc from Haunt Johns. I just did a show with her about haunted Staten Island locations where I currently live. I'm on Staten Island. So we did a really cool show about some of my favorite Staten Island locations for her show. So I'll put a link to that in the description below so you guys can find that if you want more of me. But Court and I have like this great rapport together and just always have a lot of fun. And it was a really good show. I watched it last night, and I'm biased, obviously, but she's just a great interview. She's always so much fun to talk to, and she just brings out the best in me. I just always feel so comfortable talking to her. I don't feel comfortable like this, like talking by myself. I feel more comfortable with a guest, but she always makes me feel super comfortable. She's just so much fun, and she's so gracious, and great show. So click the link below. You can find that episode as well if you're interested in Staten Island stuff. And a funny thing, I just wanted to talk about this. I'm drinking a beer today, and I'm going to show you guys here on the video. It's called Odd Pip, and this is from a brewery up in Maine called Odd Alewives. And this was a gift to me from my now ex-wife Laura, who goes up to Maine every year, and with her friend Katie Poopsie, and there's a lot of breweries up there, and they go to the Maine Brewing Company, and they go to Odd Alewives, which is like right near where they stay. And she brought me back some beer, and this is a really good one. This is Pip. It's a petite saison with Maine wheat, lemon, coriander, and hints of pepper and citrus. I mean, it's really good. I've had it before, but she brought me like another 4-pack and another one, and I'll showcase those on another show. But this is Odd Pip, and I just thought it was cool because it's odd and untold, and it's Odd Alewives, and it's Odd Pip. So an odd beer for an odd podcast, or an odd cast. So there you go. So I'm going to get into the UFO stuff now, because that's what you're really here for. You don't want to hear about me in my underwear. So unless you do, you weirdos. So let's get to the UFO stories. All right, so I'm sharing my screen here, and this is an article from the Connecticut Insider, and they talk about 3 stories, and these, all of them, all 3. So the first one is like sort of relevant to my childhood, and I'll get into that. The second one I've discussed on the show before. It's the Bantam Lake UFO. And the third one has connections to Winsted, Connecticut, which I've talked about previously on the show, the Winsted Wildman, and I'll put that link in the description below so you guys can find that episode. Is about Bigfoot in Winsted, Connecticut. But I thought that was interesting to sort of tie this all together, that Connecticut, you know, where I kind of vacation, has like weird stuff going on. So I'll get started with this. This is the first one we're going to talk about is the Westchester Boomerang, and I'll just read from this site, and then I'll give my input. So what people saw. In the early 1980s, particularly in 1983 and 1984, people reported hundreds of UFOs in the skies above Connecticut. The sightings primarily took place in Fairfield County and were most frequent in western Connecticut towns near the New York border, such as Danbury, New Fairfield, and Ridgefield. Over the border in Westchester and the Hudson Valley, sightings were equally common. As the New York Times reported in August 1984, throughout northern Westchester County, Dutchess and Putnam counties, and western Connecticut this summer, thousands of residents had reported strange objects in the sky, each usually in a V shape or a circle about the size of a football field, absolutely noiseless and outlined in brilliant lights of white, red, or green. So I'm going to stop there before we get into what probably happened. But I used to read this book repeatedly. I like reading books over and over again, and this was one of the books I used to read a lot, Night Siege by J. Allen Hynek and a few other authors. But Dr. J. Allen Hynek from Project Blue Book, the government-sponsored study of UFOs back from the 60s. And I remember reading this book, and I remember a lot of the town names sounded familiar because we passed through them on the way to Bantam. So it was like the Taconic State Parkway and Brewster, New York, and Danbury, Connecticut. So these were places that these sightings were happening. And I remember reading the book and just realizing that, wow, I passed right by these places. And as a kid, you know, I was kind of stuck on Brooklyn. We didn't go many places far away. I mean, we'd go, you know, down to Jersey but it was cool for me to kind of relate to these places and kind of see where they were and like drive through the same places where these sightings happened and just be able to visualize that without the internet, without, you know, Google Street View, and being able to pull that up just on a whim. So very cool for me as a kid to just read this book and then go up to Bantam every year and drive through these towns. We drive through Danbury. We go, you know, near the Taconic. We'd go near, you know, Mill River Parkway, all that stuff. So very cool. But now I'm going to get into what people say it was, and I'll talk about why I don't believe that. So what probably happened. As Jeff Lehman, spokesman for the Stewart International Airport in Orange County, told the Associated Press in October 1988, the majority of the Westchester boomerang sightings were caused by a group of pranking pilots flying in a formation that made them look like one craft. Lehman said the sightings coincided with when the airport knew these pilots were active, adding that the practice wasn't illegal but was annoying. I don't see scaring people with aircraft as a game, he said. However, in Night Siege, the Hudson Valley UFO sightings, the authors who had set up a hotline to track the UFO sightings claimed the hoaxing pilot story couldn't account for all the sightings. The second edition of Night Siege includes an account from Randy Edding, who says he saw a UFO in 1987 in Newtown while walking near his home. He saw a collection of strange lights in a semicircle and snapped a picture of them. Hundreds of others saw these lights, which were similar to what others had seen in the area a few years earlier, had the Westchester boomerang returned. So they addressed this in the book. The FAA kept saying, Federal Aviation Administration kept saying that these were just ultralight aircraft, pilots, hobbyists, I guess, with ultralight aircraft going out and flying in formation. And they do address this in the book, and they do talk about times when they did find that this may have been possible. But there's this right here, this description from what was seen, absolutely noiseless. Ultralight aircraft are basically like little gliders, and they have like a motor on them to spin the propeller, and it's essentially like a lawnmower engine, so very loud. And you're talking about Westchester County, Hudson River Valley, small towns in Connecticut. It's not noisy there, especially at night. You're going to hear these things. You're going to hear the motors. I mean, you're talking about 20 lawnmower engines up in the air, spinning propellers. It's not going to be noiseless. A lot of the sightings will claim that this thing hovered, this boomerang or this triangle or this circle hovered in place, that it blocked out the stars, that you couldn't see, stars between the lights. The ultralight aircraft usually, they're small. They're not, passenger jets, airlines. They're small, so they do have lights on them. They're not going to be these bright, brilliant things that people mistake for UFOs. Were a lot of these sightings probably these ultralight aircraft? Of course, because they could match up certain sightings with when these pilots were out there, but there's so many of them that were not. So there is this UFO flap up there that can't be fully explained. And it just comes across with the skeptics saying, oh, it's all these ultralight aircraft. And while that can account for a vast majority of them, again, use Occam's razor, like I talked about a few weeks ago, it doesn't account for all of them. And a lot of these sightings were not just one person saying this. It wasn't just one guy out there who may have been drinking that night and said he saw something. A lot of these craft were seen by dozens and dozens of people. If you read the book, you hear accounts of just cars pulling over on the road and people getting out and watching this craft move. And I don't think that would happen if this is just ultralight aircraft. And again, you're talking about staying in tight formation, a circle, a V shape, and you're talking about dozens and dozens of people going up in these aircraft at the same time. And, again, curiously, you don't hear people admitting to that. So are they hoaxing? Are they being annoying? Again, a lot of it probably could be hoaxes or just misidentifications, but there are instances where these craft were seen to be hovering, stationary, which an ultralight aircraft couldn't do. Like I said, it's basically a little, homemade glider with a tiny engine attached to it. And again, these days they use electric. They're probably a little quieter, but you're talking the early 80s, like they were loud. They were very loud. So that is story number one. So we'll move on to story number two. Okay, so story number two, the green whale of Bantam Lake. And again, I've talked about this one. I did a video on it by myself. I did a podcast episode. I did a bonus episode for the YouTube channel. So if you're listening on audio, head over to the YouTube channel. You'll find where me, my dad, and my son go out on the lake, and we take an EMF detector. We take magnets. We try to see if we can just find anything where this thing allegedly crashed, and we didn't, spoiler alert, but it's a cool video. You can kind of see us out there camping and being out on the boats and on the lake. And But so I have talked about this before, but I want to go over it again because I do think it bears some analysis and is worthy of some analysis. So I'm going to read from the article once again. The Green Whale of Bantam Lake, What People Saw. In the early morning hours of April 10th, 2012, an unidentified motorist called State Police Barracks to report a whale-sized, glowing green object fall into Bantam Lake. The motorist, who has never been identified, likely would have been dismissed as a prankster or magic mushroom consumer, had an on-duty state trooper about 10 miles away in Warren not also called the station to report seeing a large object fall from the sky over Bantam or Morris. So again, before I go into explanations, I just want to talk about this. So this story, I've blogged about it. I've done podcasts. I've done bonus videos. I've talked about this a lot. There's a shocking dearth of information about this case. I mean, it's out there. You can find this story out there. I've talked about it probably more than anybody, but the story is out there. But there's a lack of information. We don't know the witness's name. I don't believe the state trooper has ever been named. This has been in the newspapers. I believe it was on a TV show once, the UFO Files, or one of those shows on Travel Channel or Discovery or whatever. And they talked to some witnesses, and there were people who live on Bantam Lake who say that there were waves that, and at night, Bantam Lake is very calm. It's like glass, unless it's super windy. But they were saying that there were waves coming up on shore. So I don't know. So there's two sides of the story where it's out there. You have the state trooper, you have this other witness. I mean, calls were made, and I guess journalists have confirmed this, but we don't have the names, so it's hard to sort of do follow-up. And it's kind of taken on like this urban legend aura right now, because again, there's no names, there's no real way to sort of check on this. I don't believe the lake was searched. I've heard it was, I've heard it wasn't, I've heard people saw scuba divers going in, I've heard nobody saw anything after this. So I don't know what it was, but they're saying a whale-sized object, which would be fairly large. And I was talking to my dad about this while we were camping. The 24 hours we did actually get to camp this year, roughly. And I had mentioned that something that big, usually when you have a meteorite fall, it's something small, something crashes through someone's roof and it's a little tiny hunk of rock. You're talking about something the size of a whale. This would do some damage. It would make some noise. Like, people would hear this. There would be some sort of after effect. Even if it hit the lake, you're talking probably huge amounts of water coming up on land, people being flooded. That is a large meteorite. So we're going to get into what probably happened, what this article says. So what, if anything, fell from the heavens has never been determined, and no search of the lake has been conducted to date. But there are some plausible possibilities that, unfortunately, don't involve green men or whales. Brian Koberlein, an astrophysicist and author, has written about how meteoroids and asteroids can glow green when they enter the Earth's atmosphere as the iron nickel in the object burns up. And yeah, I mean, anybody who's used a Bunsen burner in, chemistry class in high school knows this. Given the background of this story, he says he thinks the meteor is the culprit. Meteorites usually burn up or cool down before getting close to Earth's surface, so a green, glowing meteor would still be pretty high. But given your vantage point, it can seem as if it's close to the ground. It's hard to judge position and scale in the night sky, he says. Case in point, when the moon is low on the horizon, it looks huge, but it is the same size it always is. Same with meteors sometimes. They can look big, bright, and low to the ground when they are actually further away and appear near the horizon. Given the little information available, the object was almost certainly a meteor. It happened during the Lyrid meteor shower, and green glowing meteors aren't particularly rare. Dr. Stephen Nicolescu, collections manager for the Mineralogy and Meteoritics Division at Yale Peabody Museum of Natural History in New Haven, doubts a meteorite fell into the lake. Neither of the two witnesses reported hearing any sound, which I was getting at, let alone loud bangs. Even small meteorites generate a sonic boom, he says. The last documented meteorite fall in Connecticut occurred in 2013, and though the meteorite pieces recovered in Walcott and Waterbury were only a few pounds, a boom was heard on the Connecticut shoreline. Asked to speculate, Nicolescu offers space debris or the northern lights as possibilities, but thinks both might be a stretch. The sighting, if it ever happened, remains a mystery, he said. So, yeah, I mean, my guess was always that it was a meteorite, but there are aspects of this story that bother me. Basically, that specifically, that there was no sonic boom, there was no loud bang. There was a couple of witnesses. One was a woman driving, apparently, and one was a state trooper out at night, seeing this thing fall into Bantam Lake. And for me, I think if someone is seeing a meteorite, a shooting star way in the distance, one, it was bright enough where they thought it fell into Bantam Lake. So let's assume that two different people who don't know each other think they saw something fall into Bantam Lake. If this were far away, something would have fallen far away, and we would have known about that, a meteorite fell over here. Maybe that's what they were seeing. As far as I can tell, and from my research, I don't think anything else fell that night. There were no other witnesses. So something allegedly fell into the lake. And again, there are witnesses out there who will say that there were waves. So what fell into it? Now, of course, it's possible that she saw something whale-sized. I've heard other stories say that it was whale-shaped. So maybe oblong, maybe thicker at the front and then tapering towards the end. I don't know. Again, it's very hard to do follow-up on this story because it's hard to find the witnesses and figure out what exactly they saw. And again, different articles will say whale-shaped or whale-sized, and that's two very different things. I can have, I have this like little thumb drive here that is kind of whale-shaped. It's thicker at the front and then tapers at the back. So it's roughly whale-shaped, but I mean, it's, an inch and a half long. That's what she said. But whale-sized is very different because now you're talking very large. And if something that large had hit the earth, I think we'd have known about it. It would have made a lot of noise and caused a lot of damage. So we're left with a mystery. Space debris, possible, because you're not talking that it's entering the Earth's atmosphere with the same speed as like a meteorite would. And I've heard that even just meteorites the size of a Volkswagen Beetle could cause a crater, like that's coming into the Earth's atmosphere very fast. And when it impacts, it's going to cause some problems. So something the size of a whale is going to cause problems. Space debris, possible, but I do think if it were space debris, there would have been some sort of search of the lake. Somebody would have gone out there to try to get this, whether it was ours, whether it was a foreign nation's. We're going to try to retrieve that. You can't just leave that laying in a lake where people swim and go jet skiing and go fishing. It's just very strange. The Northern Lights, we don't really see the Northern Lights here. I mean, in the past year or so, there's been some very rare instances of being able to see the Northern Lights. If you go way up, like maybe into the Adirondacks, if you go where there's like very little light pollution, Bantam Lake has a lot of light pollution. There's towns all around. And when I was a kid in the 80s, you can kind of see the Milky Way. You can see a lot of stars. Now you go up there, it's slightly better than here in New York City. There's just a lot of light pollution. You don't see the sky as well as you used to. And 2012, I was camping there. It wasn't great for the light pollution. So Northern Lights, I don't think so. Just having another sip of beer here. So let's go on to the last story, because this is pretty cool. So this is the Great Airship Sightings. And I've mentioned airships before. I've done some stories about, the Winstead Wild Man. I've done the Bigfoot sightings in New York City. A lot of yellow journalism in the 1800s and even into the early 1900s. So you got to be real careful. And there were things like wild men and airships that later morphed into, of course, Bigfoot and UFOs or UAPs, whatever they're called now. So let me read this story and then we'll kind of get into what I think. So what people saw. Above Willimantic in the early morning hours of January 7th, 1910, John H. Gray, an opera house manager, and John Manley, a policeman, saw emerging out of the black, starless sky something that resembled a chain of electric lights hitched together with a strand of fire. Gray estimated the lights, which seemed to hover, were about 50 feet long. They could have been some type of comet, he said, or an airship stopped for repairs. From December 1909 to January 1910, people across Connecticut and other parts of New England reported seeing a mysterious airship with similar characteristics. They believed it was a revolutionary new aircraft created by a Massachusetts businessman. So again, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, you have a lot of these mysterious things in the air. You had airships, you had some flying humanoids. I talked about that too as well from Coney Island. what were they? The Wright brothers hadn't really created or invented airplanes yet and flight, but people were seeing these airships, just these things in the air that had, not only floated and hovered and just sort of defied physics, but also had lights. And that is just an interesting thing to me, because we could barely electrify our homes at that point, but these airships had bright lights and searchlights and things that just sound very advanced and very electric and not like just lit up by candles. So very strange. So let me read their thoughts on what probably happened. In the late 1800s, U.S. observers began seeing phantom or mystery airships, as I mentioned. The ships were often described in an eerily similar manner to later accounts of UFOs. They were thought to be the inventions of aeronautic pioneers who had yet to share their genius with the world. And I'll get back to that. The 1909 wave of sightings began on December 12th after Wallace Tillinghast, a Worcester businessman, told a Boston Herald reporter that he had invented the world's first reliable, heavier-than-air flying machine. He said that during one of the many recent flights, he had flown it from Worcester to New York, around the Statue of Liberty, and then over Boston, far exceeding what the aviators of the day, including the Wright brothers, could accomplish. Within a month, after reporters stalked out Tillinghast's home, it became clear that his airship didn't exist, but that didn't stop hundreds of people from seeing it. Many mistook the planet Venus, which was unusually bright, for the airship. Other sightings were caused by hoaxers who read Tillinghast's boasts and released fire balloons to prank their neighbors. On New Year's Day, Edwin Hitchcock, in a prison warden in Winstead, so there's my connection to the Winstead Wildman, and his friends released a balloon at the same time as they blanketed the area with the handbills that read, January 1st, 1910, on my way to New York, and were signed by Tillinghast. Many were fooled by this hoax on top of a hoax. So, weird stuff going on here. So, again, skeptics are going to point to a couple of things here. So the first one is, people talk about the inventions of aeronautic pioneers. So all these guys who are out there creating flying suits and airships, but never sought a patent, never showed it off to the world. Tillinghast himself made these claims that he went down to New York and flew around the Statue of Liberty and then back up. And where's the proof? Where's your airship? Didn't exist. So you have these guys claiming this, or skeptics saying that that's probably what it was, or it was a hot air balloon or whatever. But people were familiar with those things. These were something different. These were airships. This was something, they almost sound like blimps or zeppelins. And it's, again, possible that that's what they were, but I find it hard to believe that so many entrepreneurs were flying blimps with lights, electric lights and spotlights, and hovering without engines, without making sound. And so many of them did this, but not a single one of them took credit for it. And the one or two people who did take credit for it couldn't prove it. They're just boasting. The whole thing about Venus, that's just the standard skeptics way to debunk things. You saw Venus. Mothman is an owl. Bigfoot is an owl. It's owls, it's Venus, it's swamp gas. There's just like the standard, deck of cards that skeptics will pull from. And it's Venus, it's this, it's owls, it's swamp gas, mass hallucination. And that's probably what they're going to say the Hudson Valley ones were, the boomerang UFO up in Connecticut and New York. There was a lot of that. They were just saying mass hallucinations. And I don't buy that people driving on the highway are all going to pull over and look up into the sky and they're all going to see the same thing because of a mass hallucination. It doesn't really work that way. So yeah, I thought it was interesting that you have this little connection to Winstead with the Winstead Wildman. But it just show that there's these UFO sightings going back in Connecticut to the late 1800s, early 1900s. Things crashed into Bantam Lake, apparently. And just on the way up to Bantam Lake, there's been UFO sightings. So my whole sort of stretch from Staten Island or Brooklyn at the time up to Bantam Lake and back has just a lot of UFO history. So very cool. And hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm going to cut it short there for this week because I just wanted to talk about those three stories, and I rambled on enough about my Bantam Lake escapades this year. So Andy, hope you're doing great, my friend. Hope you're feeling better. And lessons for the kids this week. Listen to your fathers. They always know, even when you're 49 years old like me, Dad, you were right. I needed a bigger tarp. So that is lesson number 1 from this episode. Listen to your fathers. Listen to your parents. They know better, even when you're an adult. And I'm a father myself now, but I still have things to learn. And I got a little cocky. I thought my tent would handle it. I thought my tarp would handle it, and I was wrong. And my dad got, a couple of drops of water in his tent where I was flooded out, and I have to buy a new tent now. Lesson number 2, kids, you can get divorced and still get nice gifts from your ex. And you can be friends, and we are friends, and we get along great. And it's just wonderful that we can do this beer exchange with each other and just text each other once in a while and have a laugh and share a laugh. So lesson number 2, you can break up with somebody and not be a dick. So everybody should learn that lesson. And until next week, everybody, Odd Pip here, rock and roll. And you can be friends, and we are friends, and we get along great. And
Ghosts surround you everywhere. Wait until you meet them there. In my dreams, I see your path. You glanced at me and then feedback.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, we're going to be talking about some strange UFO sightings. And I'm targeting Litchfield County, Connecticut, but specifically Torrington and Harwinton. These are areas that I'm somewhat familiar with. I've done episodes on Bantam Lake. I will link to those below. And just some weird things that have happened to us at Bantam Lake. Also an alleged UFO crash that, crashed into Bantam Lake. And like I said, I will link to those below. And this is not necessarily an audience request, but I'm doing this for an audience member, my buddy Sean, who is on Instagram. I will link to his socials down below. But Sean is in the Torrington, Harwinton area. And I've never met Sean, but I know him he follows the podcast, and we've talked online and we've talked privately a lot. Very talented artist. He does fly fishing lures and a lot of cryptid art, UFOs and Bigfoot and all sorts of creatures. So, be sure to go check him out. You can find him on Instagram at Boo Trout or the Mystified Monk. And like I said, I will link to those below. But go give him a follow. He's like myself. He's had kind of a rough couple of years, but just a great guy. And like I said, this podcast has allowed me to meet some really wonderful people. And Sean is one of them, just a great guy. And he always gives me shout outs on his socials. So I wanted to do this for him. He didn't request it. But Sean has a lot of cool stories, some UFO stories, some cryptid stories, personal stories for him. And we're trying to coordinate getting him on the show at some point soon. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully we can make that happen. But like I said, logistics can sometimes get in the way. But yeah, check him out, Boo Trout on Instagram or the Mystified Monk on Instagram. And he's got some awesome art. I'm going to throw some of that up here as I'm talking so you guys can kind of see some of his stuff. But really great guy. And we went to a Renaissance fair up in Harwinton like 2 years ago. And Sean and I were following each other and aware of each other, but I had no idea he lived in, the area. So I had stayed, right near Bantam Lake. And it was just when I got back that I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that you live right in the area. So next time I'm up there, I do need to meet up with Sean and hang out with him and his wife. And hopefully I'm going up there maybe late spring, early summer this year for the Renaissance Fair again. So we'll see. But yeah, check out Sean. And we're going to be talking about some really cool UFO sightings up in that area, Torrington and Harwinton. So let's get to that. Okay, so again, just a quick bit of geography before I get into the UFO sightings. Here's Bantam Lake. Here's Point Folly. We always camp on the eastern side of Point Folly. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can kind of see Torrington and Harwinton here to the northeast. And this is the basic area we're going to be talking about tonight. So, like I said, there was an alleged UFO crash into Bantam Lake. Litchfield has a lot of Bigfoot sightings as well. And, I've talked about this on the show before. I've talked about this with audience member Fly Spec Cafe. Pay attention to place names, Litchfield. And, it doesn't mean it's paranormal, but a lich is a tree spirit, so pay attention to this stuff. And that's not why Litchfield was named that, but I like paying attention to place names. But yeah, so we have Torrington, we have Harwinton, and when we've stayed in Bantam Lake, we've driven up into Torrington for supplies. Sometimes you go camping and you forget something inevitably, and it could be just a swimmy tube for my son, or grill equipment. We forgot a spatula, we forgot the tongs. So and town of Bantam is very quaint and cute, but not a lot there. So we would often drive into Torrington and get our supplies there when needed. So yeah, this is the basic area we're looking at. And overall, if I zoom out, yeah, this is in kind of like northwestern Connecticut, not very far from the Massachusetts border. You have Springfield, New Marlborough, Sheffield. So that's just your little bit of geography for this episode. But let's get into the UFO sightings now. All right, so once again, I'm using Newfork, the National UFO Reporting Center. Good sightings on here. A lot of times there's not a lot of follow-up. A lot of times they'll talk about photos being taken or videos being taken, and they're not here. So I don't know if that's just part of their website not allowing it. I know some sightings do have photos. So I'm just wondering if there's like an admin that's not allowing certain photos or hasn't gotten to them yet. Yeah, it's sometimes they are mentioned and not shown, and very often there's not a follow-up. Like if I'm doing Bigfoot reports on the BFRO, oftentimes there's a follow-up investigators report where it adds more detail. A lot of these on the Newfork site, I love this site. There's a great map where you can just kind of like really drill down to the exact place you want to look for UFO sightings. On the flip side, there's not a lot of the follow-up investigation. So you hear these stories, they're on the website, you can read them, but getting additional information can be a little difficult. I have been contacted lately by a lot of people, who I have been doing BFRO sightings for, and they say, hey, you covered my sighting, and they will talk to me, and usually it's just thanking me for covering their sighting. Sometimes they give me a little bit of extra info, but that's great. So I do hope that if anybody in the Torrington, Harwinton areas are listening and find this show, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear more of your story and flesh it out in a future episode maybe. But yeah, this is how the word gets out, and let's jump into these stories. So this first one from Torrington, Connecticut. This is from April of 2018, and it was a light, possibly a drone, but we'll get into that. Characteristics: there were lights on the object, it changed color, missing time. And again, that's one of the aspects in the story that's not really fleshed out. So I would love to get more info on that aspect of it. And again, it says there's good video, and there's no video attached here. So if this witness is somehow finding my show, please get in touch with me. I'd love to see the video. So this report says, good video of strange object flying over my town. I am an amateur astronomer who takes photos out my window. I was trying to get some photos of Jupiter before I would have to leave for work at 9:30 p.m. As I was setting up my scope, I saw a solid red object fly by from left to right, north to south. I thought it was a small private airplane, but I wondered why the red light did not blink. So yeah, any authorized aircraft that are flying, including drones, they have to have the navigation lights. So you're going to see the red and green, you're going to see the blinking, you're going to see the white. So to see just a solid red object is very strange. And I'm going to link back to that in a second from one of my own personal sightings. He continues, I looked out the window a few minutes later, and this object was flying directly over my head, northeast to southwest. I put my head out the window and listened carefully, but there was absolutely no sound. I went about setting up my scope. A few minutes later, this object flew above my head again, but in the opposite direction, from southwest to northeast. It was flying quite fast, but suddenly stopped still and hovered. I grabbed a pair of binoculars and looked at it. It was two solid red lights that were not blinking. Suddenly, a bright green light flashed several times between the two red lights. At this point, I grabbed my iPhone and took a video. The object sat still for a minute or so, then moved slightly down and to the right, then reversed to the left. Again, it sat still for a minute or so, then it moved upward and even seemed to be approaching me. Then it flew out of sight to the southeast. So yeah, sadly, we don't have the video. But this definitely doesn't sound like a standard aircraft. It doesn't have the standard navigation lights. And this reminds me of the story that John and I told in, I believe it was High Strangeness at Bantam Lake, that episode where we were sitting on this, the tip of Bantam Lake, the southern tip of Point Folly, and we noticed a red light in the distance, and it hovered there for probably over a half an hour. I mean, it was a long time, and we thought it was a new phone tower, electrical tower, or water tower, and just had the red light on top so that helicopters would crash into it at night. And after a while, about a half an hour, we noticed this thing moving north, and we followed it back north up to our campsite, and it just went out of sight, and it never returned. But there were no flashing lights. There was no green light. There was no white light. It was just a solid red light that moved very quickly after hovering and kind of like watching us. We thought it was just a tower on the other side of the lake. That's how kind of low and kind of close it seemed. And absolutely no noise. This was late at night. I remember most of the other people, when we got back to the campsite, were sleeping. So not a lot of them were like night owls. But John and I were up late. And when we got back to the campsite, I think it was just my father and my uncle who were still up. There weren't many people still awake. And we asked them if they had seen it, and they hadn't. But there's trees along the shoreline that would block their view of the lake. But as John and I were walking back north, we can kind of see it between the trees. We saw it just heading north. So very strange sighting. And it just this sighting reminded me of that. Just that this guy seeing a red light, and we didn't have binoculars. He has binoculars. So now he's kind of seeing that this is actually two lights. With the naked eye, it looked like one red light. But under the binoculars, it looked like two red lights and a green one in between. Could this have been an airplane? Possibly, but it's very quiet up there. It's not the city. Normally, you would hear some sort of engine noise from an airplane. Even a drone is going to make, the whirring sounds from the propellers. So to hear no noise, and this is someone who's used to looking into the sky. This is not somebody who's just, hey, it was like my first time in 6 months going outside, or someone who lives in the city who's just used to seeing planes. This is someone who's used to observing aerial phenomena. He takes photos of the heavens, stars and planets, and you'd think he would know what this was. So New Fork classifies this as possibly a drone, which I have to agree with, possibly a drone, but I'm still going to go with UFO. It's unidentified, it was flying, and it was an object. Doesn't mean it was extraterrestrials, doesn't mean it was alien, but definitely weird. And, it could have been a drone. That's the only thing it kind of sounds like. It doesn't sound like conventional aircraft. If it was far enough away, he might not have heard the drone noises, but I've seen drones from, pretty far away in the city here, Staten Island. And even when they're not super close, you can still kind of hear the whirring sound. So very, very strange sighting, this one. So let me know what you guys think about this. I'm leaning just a hair into drone territory, but still think it's a cool, interesting sighting. And like I said, I would love to be able to see the video of this if this person can find me and reach out to me. So please do. All right, so we have another sighting here from Torrington, this one from October of 2016. And this is a triangular shaped object, and we're going to have a few of these tonight. And I'm kind of focusing in on those because there's a lot of these triangular shaped objects. And for anyone who doesn't know, there was like the Hudson River Valley had a flap back in the early to mid 80s of these triangular or boomerang shaped objects over the Hudson Valley. And that ventured into Connecticut as well as New York. So not just in the Hudson River Valley, but people were seeing these further east into Connecticut. And if you check out my buddy Sean's Instagram, as I'm highly suggesting you do, because he's got some awesome art on there, he tells one of his stories about seeing a UFO when he was younger with his father, and it was this black triangle with lights, and clearly not a conventional aircraft. So I'm focusing a lot on some triangular stuff tonight. But this one was a triangular shaped object flying over Torrington, Connecticut. And the witness says, I was driving up Hospital Hill, and when I reached the top, I noticed what appeared to be a line of lights on the horizon. As I continued down the road, it came much closer, very fast, and I realized it was a triangle gliding over the town. And we're going to hear that too. And there's some stories I'm not including here because they were either just much shorter, not as detailed, but a lot of people would use the term gliding or like a paper airplane. So just wanted to call attention to that. They continue, I instantly pulled over and took multiple photos, one of which captured the object. It was dark, but I could still make out the shape, so I was able to confirm it was an object and not three separate orbs of light. The corners were very defined, and I could make out the edges, each of which had one white light, and each of which illuminated the sky somewhat. The object was moving fast, smooth, and silent. I arrived at work and was extremely happy to find that a coworker on the way to work had also seen this object gliding over town. The object was flying in a southwestern direction. I'm awful with directions, but I can assume it was flying towards the Bristol, Thomaston, or Terryville areas. So here's another one where the witness claims to have a photo, and it's not included here. So I'm guessing either the site doesn't have a way. I should try filing a report. I don't want to do that, but to see if there's a way to upload it, or if they have to contact the witness first and then get the photo and add it to the sighting report. But like I said, there's a lot of these on here where they mention video or photos, and there's just nothing. So if this witness comes across my podcast, if you were listening to this and you would like me to feature it, I would love to see the photo. I'd love to talk to you more and add more context to this. But this is a very sort of standard black triangle, black boomerang sort of UFO sighting that we've heard all throughout the Hudson Valley for many, many years. And I've seen a black triangle. I detail that in one of my earlier episodes. I will link to that below as well, so you guys can listen to that one. But he's seeing the shape, like the lights seem to be illuminating this object, even though it's dark. They're able to sort of see that it's a craft. It's not three separate objects that are just flying in tandem. It seems to be one object, defined corners. They can make out the edges. It's illuminating the sky somewhat, and it was moving fast and smooth and silently. And we hear this just so often. There's no noise. And again, for anyone who's not been to Litchfield County, it's quiet. Torrington, on the map, it may look like a big town, but it's really not. And that's no diss on Torrington. I love Torrington. I love small towns. I want to get out of New York City as much as I can, and will probably, retire outside of New York City. So I love small towns. I love Litchfield. I mean, anybody who's watched the show knows Bantam, Litchfield, Torrington. These are my places. I grew up in these places every year camping there. But you're not drowned out by noise pollution. Here in the city, I mean, there's always a siren going off. There's people revving their engines. People have their dogs out barking for hours. There's just always noise. There's noise pollution. There's light pollution. Living in the city and being outside at night are not really conducive to seeing or noticing anything out of the ordinary, honestly. It's very difficult. But up in Torrington, you're going to hear noise. So you have this thing moving very quickly, just gliding. And I know the explanation for the Hudson Valley sightings, that flap back in the 80s, was ultralight aircraft that, people would have these gliders, but even the ultralights have engines. They have little propellers. Like, yeah, it's not as loud as maybe a private plane or something larger or a helicopter, but they still make noise. But the reports would always say that these things were silent, and these things were huge. It wasn't an ultralight. It wasn't this little thing. It was people talking like football field size or bigger. This witness doesn't talk about how really large it was, but that it was an object, that it was triangular shaped, and it just glided quickly and silently. And I like that he had a coworker, or she had a coworker, who also noticed it. That's always great for when you witness something, because it sucks when you're alone. It sucks when you're the only one seeing it. So to have that independent validation and verification that, yeah, someone else saw that too. What is it? Who knows? This one to me, again, sounds like a UFO. It's unidentified, it's flying, and it was an object. So very cool. I don't think this was a drone. Again, I think they would have heard something. Different lights. It just doesn't sound like a conventional aircraft. So I'm going with UFO on this one. Okay, so now we're going to move into Harwinton, which again it borders Torrington, so it's not that far away. It's same general area. So this one comes to us from March 9th of 2022. So just 4 years ago. Triangle, again, lights on the object. This person saw it directly over their head in a driveway. So she says, massive black triangle with curved corners, a red, yellowish, and blue round set of lights under each side hovering overhead. She says, it was dark and I turned on our garage light. As I walked down the back stairs to our driveway, I heard a low but deep sound. When I reached the driveway, I looked up, and right above my head was a massive black triangle that also extended past our ranch home and just above our roof. There were a set of red, blue, and yellowish round lights underneath each side, so like each point of the triangle. Since it was dark out and the craft was black, I believe I was only able to see it because of the lights underneath it and being underneath it as well. So she's underneath it, and the lights are sort of illuminating the structure of the craft. If there's nothing between these lights, the light's just going to, get absorbed into the night. It's not going to reflect, but this sounds like it was reflecting off of the craft. And she was directly beneath it. This is not something she's seeing off in the distance. The lights were not blinding, so I could see the entire shape of the craft, which hovered over and then very, very slowly moved completely over the roof and then gone in seconds. I watched it for a good 2.5 to 3 minutes at most, I'd say. Needless to say, I was in awe. I am a 66-year-old wife, mother, and grandmother. I decided to find where to report since I've been unable to get a full night's sleep since the encounter, not through fear, but the unbelievable experience I was lucky enough to have. So she's seeing this thing, 66-year-old grandmother. She's probably not prone to flights of fancy or going out and seeing UFOs. But she sees this thing, and a couple of things really stand out. One, she's saying it was enormous, big, over her house. It's extending past the roof line, past the garage. It's big. Two, she's right underneath it. This is not something in the distance. We might be a drone. It might be an aircraft that you're just kind of seeing from a weird angle. She's directly beneath this. This is hovering over her house. It was silent. It was black. Each corner has lights, specific lights, red, blue, and yellow. That is not standard conventional aircraft lighting. It is red, green, and white. And this is red, blue, and yellow. So does not seem conventional. And why would those same 3 lights be under each point of the triangle? Very strange. She can see the entire shape of the craft, and this hovered. It wasn't moving. Last story, it was moving quickly and silently and smoothly. This one is hovering above her house and then moves and then is gone in seconds. It slowly moves and is gone in seconds. And she's watching this for almost 3 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but find something in your home, your apartment, your office, and just stare at it and time yourself for 3 minutes and tell me how much detail you can pull from that. To the skeptics, they're going to say, she only saw it for 2.5 minutes. Find something in your home, your office, stare at it for 3 minutes, and you will be able to recall exactly what you were looking at, because that's, a lot of time for a traumatic encounter like this with the unknown. This one, I can't really debunk this one and say maybe it was a drone or maybe it was just, a weird aircraft seen from a distance. She's right under it. This is over her house. It's hovering. It's silent. She's hearing this low but deep sound. So not silent. Sorry about that. Thinking of the last one. A low but deep sound. So deep, like in the chest. But it's hovering. So it's clearly making a noise of sort, but not in the conventional way. So this one, I can't really debunk. Either she's lying, and again, as with the Bigfoot sightings, I don't know what would compel somebody to come onto a site like this and type this all out and then be like, ha, 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 I got those guys. Like, where's the punchline? Where's the payoff? It's not there. So I don't, and again, if she's 66 and a grandmother, why lie? Again, it's possible. It's very possible. Is it probable, though? That's where we have to, have that distinction. It's lots of things are possible, but how probable are they? This sounds like a legitimate sighting. Sounds like a legitimate witness. And again, ma'am, if you're listening to this, please reach out to me. I would love more context on this story. Okay, a quick break from the triangles for a bit. This one comes to us from the end of August 31st of 2018, Harwinton, Connecticut. This one is an oval shaped. So lights on the object, aura or haze around the object. It emitted beams and possibly landed. So a large bright light appears to be falling from the sky. It stops and hovers, then heads in the opposite way. Was seen while driving down Route 4 towards Litchfield from Burlington. Very, very bright light that looked like it was falling to Earth. So meteor, shooting star, it could have been. Once we got closer, it stopped and hovered. So not a meteor. So like your first instinct is like, oh, is that a shooting star or a meteor falling? And then it stops and hovers. Nope. We noticed 2 small lights on either side that were also very bright. all were white, looked to be an oval/saucer shape. It then went in the opposite direction in a way that a plane simply could not maneuver. It was too large to be a drone and was not the shape of a helicopter. After we dropped off a friend and went back the same way we had come, it was nowhere to be found. So this, I like stories like this because, again, there's no hyperbole, there's no exaggeration, there's no added details. There's some things missing here, which I would like some clarification on. The characteristics of it emitting a beam and landing. We don't really hear that in the narrative part of this, but that it's falling and then it kind of stops and hovers and then just maneuvers, in ways, goes in the opposite direction. Plane couldn't do that. Too large to be a drone and not a helicopter. Again, if it's a helicopter, you're going to hear a helicopter from a long ways away. And it's all white lights. Again, a helicopter has to have the standard navigation lights that conventional aircraft are required to have. So this one, not sure what to make of this one. It does sound weird. I would say UFO just because it's unidentified. Again, doesn't mean it's alien or extraterrestrial or interdimensional. But if this witness is listening to the show, I would love to speak with you. You're saying here it emitted beams and that it landed. So I'm wondering if there's some other details that are not present in the narrative here. Because the black triangle I saw dropped like this weird sparkly stuff. And the thing I saw was very far away. So the detail was lost on me. I could see that it was triangular, that it was black. It was a daytime sighting, and I saw like lights being dropped from it. Very strange. And my sighting lasted almost 49 minutes. So long time to see something. So I would love more info on this, but hard to say what this is, but it definitely sounds odd. So I will leave it at that, but let me know what you guys think. Okay, so we're back to triangles. This is a triangular shaped object over Harwinton, Connecticut, and this comes to us from April of 2017. A triangular craft with 3 bright lights traveling low and fast. And we hear this a lot with the triangular craft. There's usually lights on each point. Sometimes there's one like right in the middle as well, but it's almost all the time that there's lights on each point. So they're seeing 3 lights. This is triangular craft, light on each point. Sometimes there's a light in the middle. And this person says, I was driving home Saturday night, 10:45 p.m., April 1st, 2017, on a quiet back road, and while I drove up a hill close to my home, I saw 2 bright white lights sitting in the sky, almost like stadium lights, so very bright. As I drove closer to the lights and closer to my home, I saw that there were actually 3 white lights, and the lights formed the shape of a triangle. It's hard to estimate the size of the craft and the height of it, but this craft was lower than any other plane I've seen in my life. I stopped in the middle of the road to try and take a picture. At this point, I realized the craft is moving and is moving pretty quickly southeast. So sometimes when you're driving, it looks stationary because it's kind of moving at the same relative speed and direction that you're moving in. So it'd look more stationary. So once he stopped and gets out, it looks like it's moving. And same thing with like estimating height of a craft or the distance or the size. At night, there's not a lot of context clues. You're not seeing a lot of detail. If you're just seeing a light, it can be very difficult to accurately say where this is in relation to the ground or in relation to you. Like, is it 30 feet away, 100 feet away? Is it 30 feet up? Is it 100 feet up? You just don't know. So they continue. I quickly take one picture that didn't turn out well and drove quickly to my home about 200 yards away. I raced inside to gather the attention of my family, and by the time I got my family and myself out on the deck, the craft had just passed over the tree line. So it looks like they may have caught just like a fleeting glimpse of it as it passed over the tree line. The night sky was clear. There were very little clouds in the sky, so the visibility was clear. The moon was in the waxing crescent phase, so it wasn't giving off much light. The 3 white lights of the craft were extremely bright, brighter than any star or plane I've seen. So another one, it's a triangular shape, white lights, no red, no green, no flashing. It just sounds like these were steady lights that moved. He tries to take a picture. It didn't turn out well, which again, first of all, we're going back like 9 years, almost 9 years now. We're coming up on April. So this is going back 9 years. The cell phones were not as powerful as they are now as far as capturing things. And even now, trying to take a picture of the night sky can be very difficult. You have to hold very still to allow the exposure to let the light in. Again, there's no photo attached here, so I don't know if this person just felt it wasn't good enough, or if the site itself just didn't allow the upload. But this is another good one. Triangle doesn't sound like a conventional aircraft. So very curious. It's moving quickly. He tries to have his family see it, and they barely see it, but that's what happens with these things. If these things hung out for an hour, more people would see them. My sighting, it happened for a long time, but it was so distant. I don't think most people on the street would have seen it. I just noticed it because I was in my car staring into space waiting for a store to open. So, but again, I will link to that story below so you can hear the full thing and get the context of that. Okay, so the last story for tonight, it's another triangular shaped craft over Harwinton, Connecticut. And I'm going to link to the New Fork sites down below so you guys can find these. There's many more sightings in Torrington than in Harwinton. But I wanted to give a little bit of a mix, and I wanted to kind of focus more on Harwinton because there's just so many in Torrington. So I could kind of get through the Harwinton ones a little bit easier. But this one, again, another triangle. This is from October 20th of 2016. And this one, lights on the object, animals reacted. Triangular craft flying low with 2 red lights in the back and a white light in the middle. So like I said, sometimes they're in the middle. And this one seems to just have 2 red lights. So the witness says, I woke up one morning while getting ready to go to school and heard a low, deep noise coming from the back of my home. So low, deep noise. We heard that in one of the previous stories. The 66-year-old grandma who hears this low, deep noise. Interesting. I quickly ran to my back window and saw a large triangle-shaped craft flying fast and low over the skyline. So this one again is moving fast and low. The sky was somewhat dark, but clear skies. The craft had 2 red lights on the back, not blinking, and 1 white light in the middle of it, somewhat like a spotlight. The craft quickly passed over the trees to where I couldn't see it anymore, and the sound dissipated. After the craft passed the trees, the chickens I raised started acting uneasy, running around frantically like something was chasing them. So, as I always say in the show, pay attention to your animals, whether it's a Bigfoot sighting, a UFO sighting, paranormal. I've done a whole episode on animal ghosts and how animals react. But they can sense things that we can't. They can hear things, they can see things before we can, or that are just out of our visual range or auditory range. So pay attention when the animals start acting weird. It doesn't prove anything, but it's just one more little piece of evidence of like maybe something weird is going on. They say, I live in a rural town with only woods behind my home. Due to the little pollution in my area, so, regular air pollution, light pollution, noise pollution, I regularly watch the skies looking at different planes. This craft was not like anything I had ever seen before. So another weird one, and I am wondering if the number of lights is due to his perspective. He's saying this was flying low in, through a window. He's seeing this through a window in his backyard. So it's flying over the tree line. It's low. So if he's seeing more of a horizontal thing with this rather than up in the sky where he can maybe see 3 lights, maybe he's only seeing the 2. I don't know. I'm just guessing here because, like I said, for the most of the triangle reports we hear, there's the 3 lights, 1 on each point, and sometimes the 1 in the middle. Hard to say with this one, but he's saying it was moving fast. I just think it's interesting that he's, talking about the same thing, the low, deep noise, which most planes you're hearing, they unless they're very low and close to you, you're not hearing that low, deep roar of the engines. I mean, you go to an airport and you're right next to a plane landing, you're going to feel that and hear that. But if something's up in the sky or in the distance, you're usually hearing the whine of the jet engines. It's more high pitched. It's more, it's not deep and low usually. So very interesting sighting. And just that the chickens were reacting. Like I always like paying attention to peripheral evidence. What else is going on in this sighting? Is it just the aircraft, or is your dog reacting weird? If you're walking in the woods and you hear something and your dog's not paying attention to it, like maybe it's nothing, maybe it's you, but it's this sort of independent verification. You have an animal reacting to something. Pay attention to that. It doesn't prove paranormal, but animals react to things for a reason. They're not people who just are silly sometimes. Animals react to things for a reason. Doesn't mean it was this UFO, doesn't mean anything else, but they were reacting to something. Maybe, maybe there was a fox in the woods nearby and they heard it and this guy didn't. I don't know. But things to pay attention to. So yeah, another triangle craft over Litchfield, Connecticut. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for our UFO sightings in Connecticut episode. Litchfield, Torrington, Harwinton, beautiful towns if you can get up there. I love Bantam Lake. Don't go to Bantam Lake. I went there for myself. No, but seriously, it is beautiful country up there. And I was happy to do this episode for my buddy Sean. As I'm recording this, he doesn't know that I'm doing this for him. So I'm going to reach out to him and just give him the heads up. But yeah, check him out. Bootrout and the Mystified Monk. He's on Instagram. Awesome artist. Fly fishing lures and cryptid, UFO, paranormal artwork. He's done Bigfoot. He's done, recreations of his encounters that he's had. Really cool stuff. Like I said, I threw some of that stuff up earlier in the video, but check him out. And if you have a place or phenomenon you want me to cover, shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com, or you can leave it down in the comments below. Like you want me to cover UFO sightings in your town or county or state, or Bigfoot sightings or Mothman or any other like local lore, cryptids or creepy lore. I'm happy to do that for you. Like I said, a lot of my episodes recently have been audience requests. This one I'm just doing for Sean because he's a good guy, and I just wanted to do something cool for him. So Sean, buddy, keep on rocking, and hopefully we can get together soon in person and on the show here. And because I'd love to hear your stories. I know you got a bunch of them, and I've seen them on Instagram, and they're just so cool. And I would love to dig deeper with you on air here. So yeah. And question everything, everybody. We always have to question things. There's a lot of news going on right now in the Bigfoot world and in the UFO world, and disclosure is coming any day now. And any day now, we're going to know the truth about aliens. And it's been any day now for, 15, 20 years. But there's been a lot of news lately, and a lot of it is very exciting, and people get really excited about it, and they want to harp on it, and they're not really using critical thinking. They're not questioning things. So whether it's a Bigfoot flap somewhere or the Patterson-Gimlin footage being fake, once again, someone's coming out and saying, oh, we have absolute proof that was faked, and we'll see. I just doubt it, because it's just, the skeptics who cried wolf once again. But question things. And that doesn't mean that these things aren't real. Maybe the film is fake. I don't know. Maybe the flap is 100% real in Ohio. I don't know. But we have to question it, because if we don't question it, that's not science. That's just believing things. And, to blindly believe something like this is a bit silly. You got to really question it. And it doesn't mean you're, insulting the witnesses or disbelieving the witnesses. It's just, we need more information. And that's why I said with almost every story tonight, I would love the witnesses to come forward and reach out to me and just give me more context, because there's no follow-up on this website. And I would love more information on some of these stories. And it's just, I have questions, question everything. So yeah, until next time, everybody, embrace the weird, rock and roll. Go check out Sean's stuff. I'm going to link to that below. He's awesome. See you next week, everybody. And just give me more context, because there's no follow-up on this website, and I would love more information on some of these stories. And it's just, I have questions. Did a UFO really crash into Connecticut's Bantam Lake? Many of the residents from Bantam say yes, they saw something green and fiery fall into the lake. And even some of my viewers have commented from some previous videos to say they were there and they saw it. And I'm going to be talking about their experiences tonight and what they saw, as well as other UFO sightings in the Bantam area. So stick around, and we're going to be talking about some cool UFO sightings in Connecticut, Bantam area.
Ghosts surround you everywhere. Wait until you meet the man. In my dreams I see your path. He glanced at me and then faded back.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And I've just gotten back from another trip to Bantam Lake up in Litchfield, Connecticut, and was up there for a few things. First of all, we went to the Robin Hood's Medieval Fair, which is a Renaissance fair up in Harwinton, Connecticut, which is just about 20 minutes outside of Bantam. We did 2 days there. It was really awesome. It's a smaller fair, but some really good acts there, and we just love going to the Renaissance fairs and hanging out. So a lot of fun there. And while we were there, we ran into and met up with my friend Sean and his wife Grace, and we all went out to dinner. Sean, I did an episode for Sean a few weeks ago about UFO sightings in Connecticut in Torrington and Harwinton. So we've been following each other on Instagram for a long time, and because I'm not in Harwinton, it's hard for us to meet. So I was up there and we met. We went out for dinner. We had some awesome conversation. Just wish we could have hung out longer. You know, it was just a long day for us, and you know, darkness comes and it's time to go to bed. So, but we did hang out for a while. But you know, I love the Bantam area. Bantam Lake is just so cool. And there's a lot of UFO sightings up there. And I've discussed this on the show many times before. I've had episodes about the Bantam Lake UFO crash, and John and I did an episode on high strangeness at Bantam Lake. And I've done little spin-off episodes about searching the lake for the UFO. Not that I was expecting to find anything, but me, my dad, and my son went out there and we looked. So yeah, this week I wanted to cover that again because I've had many viewers since I posted those episodes talking to me about how they were there. These are people from Bantam, around Bantam, Morris County, who witnessed this green object hovering, shooting across the sky, and even falling into Bantam Lake. So was it a UFO? Was it a meteor? We'll get into that. But I did want to cover some other UFO sightings from around that area because I just spent the weekend there and I love Bantam Lake. And so we will do that. And yeah, just Sean, Grace, thank you guys for watching. It was awesome meeting you. And let us get into some UFO sightings right now. Okay, so once again, I'm using New Fork, the National UFO Reporting Center, their database for all these UFO sightings tonight. And right up here is Bantam. This is Bantam Lake, this little peninsula here dangling from the top. This is where we camped. We camped on the east side, looking east. And but there are some sightings from here. The UFO, I'm hearing different things about where in Bantam Lake it crashed, but we'll get into that when I get to that story. But I do want to cover some of the stories from Bantam here. And right up here, this road, I mean, this is kind of where we go shopping and just very cool area. And we might get to one down here in Morris County as well. It's a short story, so I don't know if I'm going to cover it, but we will see how the episode goes. So let us move on to some UFO sightings in Bantam, Connecticut. All right, so this first sighting happened on July 4th of 2014. So we're going back a little bit. Bantam, Connecticut. Lights on an object, left a trail, and changed color. So a little bit odd. And this witness says they saw two moving lights floating around in the yard, slowly moved back and were flashing like a strobe. Also a cluster of lights in the trees above. So these almost sound more like those orbs that people see closer to the ground, and they're smaller. They're not the typical large, you know, saucer shape or triangle shape craft. These are like smaller lights. And I've talked about these on the show before. I've never really done a full episode on them, but in various UFO episodes, I have discussed these orbs that people see. So let's get to the narrative here where it says, there were two moving lights floating around in my yard, slowly moved by the window, then moved back and were flashing opposite me, like they took a picture. Also, up in the trees, I saw a cluster of glowing strobe-like flashing and then twinkling lights getting brighter, then dimming, changing colors with no sound. At first, I thought they were fireworks, this 4th of July, but they were not fireworks. They stayed in the exact spot for an hour. This is not the first time I've seen these. A few days ago, I saw two fireballs behind my house. I looked out the window and I noticed lights in the woods. They quickly came into view above the trees at a very high speed, leaving a contrail like a comet. Then they appeared to play and move around in the backyard. And I noticed at the same time there was this cluster in the trees in a similar spot and height as last night. The small balls of light also came by the window and flashed. It seemed as though they were watching and observing me. Then they just disappeared, orbs and cluster in the trees. So a very strange story. Like I said, this does sound like the orbs that people have told me about, and I do hope to do an episode on that at some point. I've seen these things. I know people who've seen these things, and it's very similar behavior. These orbs are low to the ground. They're usually like grapefruit size, basketball size. They're not large craft that we think of when we think of UFOs, but the flashing, the going to different windows, almost like they were looking in the windows, just very strange. And I've heard that before. So anytime I hear these stories, it makes me wonder. why are they going to the windows? It's almost like they're peeking, they're looking at us. Very strange. Some of these, he's saying they left a contrail like a comet. The skies out there can be pretty clear. I'll throw some pictures up that I took this past weekend, and you can see the stars. You can see trails of like planes that were going by as I was taking the long exposure photos to get the stars. So a cool sighting. I think, we can separate some of the comet type stuff from the orb stuff. The orb stuff is really interesting. But again, I've heard this up in the trees, going to the windows, moving around the backyard. Weird, very weird. And I don't know what to make of them. Are they probes? Are they? And again, if aliens wanted to spy on us discreetly, why are these things lit up so brightly where people can see them? Just very strange, but happened in Bantam. So wanted to throw that out there. And let me know what you guys think of these orbs. Again, not the traditional flying saucer or triangle or cigar-shaped craft that we typically hear about. Just very strange orbs in the woods behind this guy's house. So let me know what you guys think of this one. Okay, so this next story took place in the summer of 1975. So we're going back a long time. One observer, they say it was a circle. Animals reacted, which again, we hear in a lot of these stories where animals, people may have a dog or a cat, or they have chickens out back, and the animals react. So it's unusual because, a plane goes overhead, a helicopter goes overhead. The animals usually don't react. So what's changing their behavior? So I'm just going to pull up a map of Bantam Lake here. And this is the area we're going to be talking about, Brunetto Grove, which is these houses down here. We camped here on Point Folly, like I said, on the east side. So we were about mid-peninsula here. And our campsite looks out towards the west, like towards Marsh Point here. Kilbourne Cove, you have Keeler Cove. And I've heard different things about where the green UFO crashed. And we'll get to that. But just so you guys kind of see what I'm talking about here. But this report is coming from down here, Brunetto Cove, and these houses. So let me get to the story. So it's a circular object with white around it and yellow in the middle. And they say, I lived on Bantam Lake, and I was down at the Brunetto Grove beach area with one of the neighborhood dogs named Rusty. All of a sudden, this circular object showed up. It was hovering over the water about 6 feet from me. The size was 4 feet by 4 feet. So again, you're talking a small object. This is not a large UFO craft. It's more like a little orb or probe. The dog saw it because he was barking at it. The outside of color was white and the inside of it was yellow. So very interesting. And I've heard this again with the orbs, that they're an amber color, an orange color, a yellow color. That's mostly what I've heard. I've heard red, I've heard white, but this orangish amber range is what I hear a lot. So interesting that it was yellow. They say, I started talking to it saying, hi, who are you? And it said nothing, just continued to hover. Then it started to bounce over the water, went up over the trees by Point Folly and zipped out of sight. So Point Folly is where I camp. So it went, sort of northeast up to Point Folly. But he's kind of talking to it, and again, I can see that, like you see something that's like really weird and you're like, oh, hello, how are you today? Weird floating orb object from possibly another planet or dimension. Just very strange. And the dog's barking at it. And this to me, just it's funny, but it just rings so true and sincere that you see something like this and just you're like, oh, hello. And hope it doesn't zap you or abduct you or whatever it's going to do. It started to bounce over the water. So I don't know if he means, above the water or actually hitting the water and bouncing on the water. I'm going to say over the water, just that it kind of floated over the water, over the trees. And again, we hear this a lot with the orb stories, that it goes to the windows, but that it also then just, for whatever reason, goes back up into the trees. Like the leaves are going to hide it when it's glowing bright yellow or orange or whatever. And then it went over to Point Folly and zipped out of sight. So very strange. And they finish up by saying, I don't know what it was, as it didn't make any noise and it was just bouncing. I do know that a few days later, there was a sighting of a UFO in Connecticut. I know what I saw and I will never explain it. There's a note here that just says the witness indicates the date of the sighting is approximate. And I get that. You see something weird, 1975. You're talking, 51 years ago. I get it, but he probably knows it was summer, late summer, August, sees this thing. Very strange. And again, I will link to my old episodes below, but John and I, we've seen some weird things at Point Folly. I don't know what they were. I call them UFOs, and I say this in all my episodes: unidentified, flying, and an object. That's all I'm implicating, that it was unidentified, it was flying because it was in the air, and it was an object of some sort. I'm not saying it was from another planet. I'm not saying it was from another dimension. It could be military, it could be whatever, but this is 1975. You don't have people flying drones. It's small. It's not, like I said, the large saucer craft that we think of when we think of UFOs. And, because sometimes people see these things, they say it was as big as a football field, or it was huge, it blocked out the stars. We hear about these really massive UFOs, but we also hear about these little orb or probe sort of craft, and I don't know what to make of it, but I hear it over and over again. And as I'm doing these episodes, I keep coming across it. And this is from 1975. So very bizarre, but I like it because it went over Point Folly, which is where I camp. So very, very strange. Okay, and this brings me again to the Bantam Lake UFO crash, if you want to call it that. And we're going to talk about this story, and there's the official explanation, and then I want to get into some of my audience comments, people who contacted me, because they add some details that you're not getting in the mainstream media. But this happened on April 10th of 2012, about 2 a.m. local time, give or take, Bantam, Connecticut. And they say this was a glowing whale-sized object falling from the sky into the Connecticut Lake. It was initially seen by a motorist, and this is what made it into the papers. The following is an article published on 4/12 of 2012 on Fox News. A state trooper and a motorist reported a large object falling out of the sky in Litchfield, Connecticut. A green, glowing, whale-sized object that plunged into Litchfield Lake, which is Bantam Lake, not Litchfield Lake, so they got that wrong. It is a Litchfield Lake, but it's called Bantam Lake. State authorities said no go. They failed to locate anything mysterious. The Republican American of Waterbury reports that a person driving in Litchfield at about 2 a.m. Tuesday reported that an object the size of a whale fell from the sky and crashed into Bantam Lake. Officials say that at about the same time, a state trooper 10 miles away in Warren, which we go near when we go up there, he called dispatchers to report that something fell out of the sky and landed near Bantam or Morris. And Morris County kind of intersects with Bantam Lake. It's mostly in Bantam, but a little bit of it is actually in Morris County. Morris firefighters made several passes up and down the lake in a boat looking for a possible plane crash, but they didn't find any debris. Authorities called off the search, leaving the mystery unsolved. But science may have the answer. According to the National Weather Service, there was a meteor shower that morning. WTNH.com reported, perhaps the whale-sized object was simply a meteor. And there's a link here to the story. I will post this down below. I did a blog post about this a long time ago. Like I said, I've done numerous episodes on this, so I don't want to really rehash this too much. But I did want to talk about my audience contacting me and saying they were there. And they add some detail to this. And interesting that a state trooper saw it too. So you have, law enforcement as well as just another motorist. So let me get into some of my viewers and what they saw, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so from one video, UFO crash at Bantam Lake. I will link to all these again below, but some users did comment here. So this one user JN6LK, you guys can go to the video and read the comments. But they say people wouldn't mistake a UFO green, size of a whale, crashing into the lake. If a meteorite, it would have created a big impact. I know a few of the responders. So a cryptic message. But yeah, if something that big crashed into the lake, I mean, the lake is a big lake, but it's not like one of the Great Lakes. It's like the biggest lake in Connecticut. But if you look on a map, it's not a huge lake. If something fell into the lake, even something relatively small, you would have had much more damage, much more of an impact. People would have known. There are houses surrounding the lake, like on the lake. And we'll get into that. Another commenter, Robert Brown 5248, said, I have more information to add to this. I was in Torrington out at a baseball field with a clear view, and the next few days later with the ball field visible to Route 8 and possible retrieval. I would even submit to a polygraph. No joke. I know what we saw. Email me some questions and I'll give you a detailed factual report. And he comments on some other videos as well, so I'll get into that. He does provide some more detail later. Sauceman5616 says, I remember this quite well because I was sitting out by the campfire at my childhood home in Litchfield when I saw this object falling in the distance. So very interesting. There's more witness to this than just the two people. You know, you have the motorist and the state trooper, but I've been contacted by other people who've seen this. So very interesting. So I did another episode calling Investigating the Bantam Lake UFO, and this wasn't a podcast episode. This was like me, my dad, and my son. We just went out on our rafts and we were paddling around where this object allegedly crashed or fell. So on this one, we have a comment from user BadTwin42, who talks about a weird experience on Bantam Lake, and I'll tell about that, but also what they saw. And she says, I was kayaking on that lake about 2 months ago or more, and all of a sudden the lake began to get extremely wavy as if boats just drove by, making the waves. But I was the only one on the lake, or at least that part. I didn't see or hear any motorized boats. I honestly thought it was an earthquake at first. Weird. But wouldn't be surprised if something weird military-wise was going on over there, as Camp Columbia was there as a military camp from 1906 to the 1980s. Also, me and my friends were driving in Watertown and saw the green light hover as if it was a helicopter for a minute or two. Then it shot down like a green streak of light. Only the next day we found out it crashed in Bantam Lake. So she has this weird experience on the lake, which I do want to talk about, because when there's no wind and there's no other boats on the lake, that water can be like glass. Very still, calm lake. If there's a lot of wind, and if you're kayaking, you know there's wind, because the wind will make kayaking either very difficult or very easy, depending on if it's coming at you or behind your back, because it could propel you forward, or it could just be this hindrance that you're paddling against. So interesting, but I like how she tries to sort of debunk it and say maybe it was an earthquake, maybe there was something else going on, but that it was weird that these waves came out of nowhere. And like I said, the lake is big, but it's not huge enough where if there's a motorboat, you're going to hear it, you're going to see it, and then you get the waves. And again, the waves don't really get big unless you're like right up against the shore. So really interesting. But the green UFO crash, I think, is interesting because she's seeing this green light hover, and there's going to be some more stories where they talk about it hovering. So it's not a meteor if it's hovering. Meteor is just going to fall. Gravity is pulling it. Its momentum is pulling it. And we hear this a lot with UFO stories where skeptics will say, oh, you saw Venus, you saw this, you saw... Those things don't stop and hover and change direction in midair. They're going so fast, they can't. You know, they can maybe change direction a little bit once they bounce off the atmosphere, but they're not going to hover. They're not going to stop. They're not going to make a right, 90-degree turn. Very strange, but she's saying that this hovered like a helicopter for a minute or two, not just a couple of seconds, a minute or two. It's hovering and then shot down in a green streak. Doesn't sound like a meteorite to me. Very, very odd. And again, at the time, they're just seeing it shoot down. They didn't know where it landed, where it went. And then the next day, they know it landed in Bantam Lake. So make of all this what you will. And this last bit of info comes to us from my video with John. I did with my buddy John, High Strangeness at Bantam Lake. And we talked about our personal experiences there. But I did mention the UFO crash in Bantam Lake. And user Das Ghost, who I don't know if it's the same user from before. It's a different name, but the story is very similar. So I'm going to read what they write here. And he says, I was a witness that did not come forward. I was in shock, to be honest, and no one would have believed me. I witnessed the whole thing from entry to recovery that night. We were sitting at the baseball/football field down the south end of Torrington the night that it came out of the sky. It did fall, but it fell straight over us in the field. It came down fast, really damn fast. It hovered for a second and then shot straight across the city like it was a tiny dot in the sky, looking up and then got brighter and brighter and so damn bright. I had to turn my head when I looked back. It literally shot across the sky. I would be willing to take a polygraph on it. And then he adds another comment where he continues, the next evening, we saw a large 18-wheeler flatbed surrounded by what looked like federal vehicles and a few SUVs, and the flatbed had federal vehicles up front and in the very back, and on all sides they had blue flashing lights. Whatever was on that flatbed was cylindrical in shape and tarped. It looked like it was as big as what they say, not a sperm whale, but about 35 to 40 feet long, 10 feet wide, cylindrical object. It was heading towards Winsted, Connecticut, which is interesting because I've done an episode on the Winsted Wildman, which is an alleged Bigfoot sighting or series of sightings from like the late 1800s. So I will link to that episode down below too. A lot of high strangeness in Connecticut. And it was heading towards Winsted, Connecticut on Route 8, coming from the far south end of Torrington, like they came down from Litchfield, and that road goes all the way to Morris Bantam Lake area. So very interesting. And I mean, the story itself just sounds a little tropey, a little 1950s, UFO alien invasion movie where you have the feds and you have the big truck and there's this thing on a tarp. And you'd think that if they captured something like a UFO from another planet or another dimension, that they would try to conceal it better than just throwing a tarp over it on an 18-wheeler. But at the same time, people do see these things, and it makes you wonder. There was a similar thing with the Long Island UFO crash, and I will link to that below. I did an episode on that. But you have this thing that crashes, and the government is saying it's a meteor, it's space debris, it's nothing. But then they're carrying it out on a tarp, and there's lots of military vehicles or federal vehicles, and they're not letting people see what it was. And let me talk about my thoughts about this. So do I think that what crashed in Bantam Lake was an actual UFO? Not really. One, like I said, the lake is not big enough for a craft to crash into it. Two, it's not remote enough where if something crashed and the military were there, people would have seen this that night, the next day. Like I said, there are houses all along the shoreline. There are campers there. I mean, this was April, so Point Folly, not open yet back then in April. I think even now they don't open until like the 1st of May. So there wouldn't have been campers there, but you would have had people who live along the lake seeing this activity. And apparently we do. We have some people seeing this activity. So I don't know if it was a crashed UFO. I think if this was something really dangerous like that, they would have cordoned off the area. They would have evacuated people. Do I think it was a meteor? I also don't know about that either. If it was as big as people are saying, 35 to 40 feet long, 10 feet wide, I've heard people saying like a meteorite the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, which is much smaller than that. If that hit Earth, like we'd have a bad problem. That would create a big crater. So here you're talking about something much larger than a Volkswagen Beetle crashing into the lake. And, you might say, oh, the water maybe cushioned its crash. I mean, the water in Bantam Lake, especially in the area where they're saying it crashed, you're talking maybe 15 feet deep at its deepest in that area. I mean, I think Bantam can go to like 40 feet deep in certain places, but it's not a very deep lake where this rock from space is going to crash, and it's not going to create huge waves or anything like that. I had other people, I couldn't find the comments. I wasn't sure if it was emails or it was comments on other videos. But there was one guy who said he lived on the lake and there were waves coming up that night. So he's saying something did crash because he was outside and there was water just washing up and very roughly the way he described it. Again, I wish I could find the comment. I can't now. I apologize. But that was the one last comment that I got from a viewer or listener who said, yeah, like there were waves coming up. Clearly something big fell in the lake, because even, I've seen really fast motorboats in that lake and you get waves. They're not these big crashing waves that come up on shore like this guy was telling me. So really interesting. Possible space debris, of course, very possible. And if the feds got out there at night, before sunrise, and they retrieved this thing. I don't know how they would have gotten boats into the lake. It's not an easy lake to get into from Point Folly, which, again, this craft allegedly fell near Point Folly. So again, is it a UFO? By the strictest definition of the word, yes, or the anagram anyway. It's unidentified, it was flying, and it was an object. But people saw this thing. They saw this thing hovering. They saw it change direction. They saw it fall into the lake. You have many more witnesses than the motorist and the state trooper. So I appreciate everybody for chiming in. Hopefully this video reaches even more people and more people can contact me. Again, you can email me. You can leave a comment on this video or on the audio versions. Leave a comment, shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com, and very happy to speak to you and get more information. Don't know what to make of this one. This one has baffled me. I mean, clearly people have seen something. There's some weirdness surrounding it, but I can't imagine anything very large fell into the lake unless this thing disintegrated. It could have been the size of a whale when these people were seeing it, but it would have had to have been very small when it fell into the lake to not make a bigger dent, if you will. Something very large would have created a crater, maybe burned some trees. Waves from the lake would have really been noticeable, and apparently they were, but not like tsunami waves, you know, and something that big would have caused some devastation, and there's no devastation there. You know, we were there probably just a few months after this happened and no sign of anything. So not sure what to make of it, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's do one more story. Let's do the Morris County story. It's not as intriguing as the other ones. It's a little bit shorter, but it's right by Bantam Lake. And if Bantam Lake has UFOs, it might be one to just throw on the pile. So let's talk about that one last. Okay, so this last story, as I said, is from Morris County. It's just a little bit south of Bantam Lake, not by much, very, very close to Bantam Lake, but in Morris County. Like I said, Morris County overlaps a little bit into the Bantam Lake property. This happened on December 26th of 2024, so just a couple of years ago, and day after Christmas. So this was Morris County, Connecticut, in the backyard of a 7-acre farm. It was an orb. It was bright. Not sure of the size. It was seen from land. It was seen in the southwest, and closest distance was about 100 yards. A very short story here, so let me get to that and then I'll give my thoughts. But like I said, I think it's good to just add these stories to the pile because we've seen some weird stuff at Bantam Lake, weird lights in the sky, and those are all included in the previous episodes, which again are linked below. But for this story, the witness says, I saw an orb traverse from the horizon to about 100 feet in the air about 8 p.m. I thought it might be a drone from a neighbor. As I mentioned at 8 o'clock, I saw what I thought was a drone from a neighboring house. However, I saw the same orb moving at around 3:30 a.m. This is when I videotaped what I saw. There's no video here, and as I've mentioned in the past, New Fork, a lot of these stories will mention pictures or video, and it's not included. And I don't know if this is a function of the website, because some stories do have the video and the photos. So I don't know if someone has to manually approve that to be published. I don't know if the person just forgot to attach the file or if the file was too large and didn't know how to compress it. So there's no video here, but he's seeing what he's describing again as an orb. There's no color here, but they're saying it was a bright light. It is quiet up there. It's not the city. I mean, there's civilization there. Clearly, there's people living there. There's homes. New Milford is pretty close as far as a bigger town goes. But at night, it is very, very quiet. If this was a drone, this guy would have heard it. And drones typically look like little helicopters, and you hear the propellers, you know, they're buzzing. So weird. And then again, he's seeing it at 8:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. I'm sorry, 8 o'clock at night, and then again at 3:30 in the morning. Very strange, very strange. But again, the orb. And like I said in previous episodes, John and I have seen things. John saw some things in the sky that seemed to be like dancing with each other. We saw a red light one time that was just kind of hovering above the horizon for probably 45 minutes. We were just sitting on the lake at night on a rock, just talking. And this thing was, you know, we thought it was like a red tower beacon so helicopters wouldn't crash into it. And then it zipped off and it went north. And, just weird. Again, not a helicopter. We didn't hear any blades or propellers. No noise, no engine noise, nothing. So we've seen weird things. There was one time we were sitting at the campfire and we see these orange lights kind of floating over the campground, just one and then two and then a third one. And at first we were like, what the hell is that? It looked really weird. And then once they got a little closer, we could see that they were Chinese lanterns. So somebody must have launched these lanterns and they're just really eerie looking. But as they got closer, you could see the flames flickering and you could see the structure around them. But at first it was just these orange lights just kind of floating over Point Folly. And we thought they were UFOs, but they were just Chinese lanterns. So very, very strange stuff. All right, everybody. So please let me know what you think these things were. There's these orbs. I would love to hear your stories if you have orb stories, because I've heard these from people I know and trust, and I've seen them myself, and I don't know what to make of them, but the stories are always very similar, like I said. So if you have an experience with these orbs, please let me know. If you're in Connecticut, if you've been on Bantam Lake, if you saw the green UFO crash into Bantam Lake, I would love to hear from you. So please shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com, and would be happy to speak to you. You can come on the show, or you could just share your story and I can share it on the show like I've shared these tonight. But Bantam Lake is a place that's really near and dear to my heart. I love going there. Been going there since I was a kid. And over the years, I've seen some strange things. Most of the time, nothing strange at all. But, we've had a few instances where I've seen, and others have seen strange things there. So I love investigating this stuff. I love to hear what people in Bantam, in and around Bantam, Litchfield, Torrington, Harwinton, if you've seen things up there, I want to hear from you. So like I said, jason@oddanduntold.com, shoot me an email. And until next time, everybody, question everything like I'm questioning these stories. Were these drones? Was this space junk? Was this just a meteorite? Very possibly, but there's no one explanation that really covers it all, and that bothers me. That it yes, most likely was a space rock, but it does. There's things about it that don't really make sense. Space debris, same thing. Most likely Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. Usually, that's the key word there. Not always. So we got to keep that in mind. So I don't know what to make of this. There's just more questions than answers. But I do love that people reached out to me to give me their feedback and their experience. So I would love to hear more if you guys are out there and you hear this and watch this and want to talk to me about it. I'd love that. But yeah, stay weird, everybody. Embrace the weird. And until next time, I will see you next week. Rock and roll, everybody. Keep watching the skies because God knows what's falling from them. But I do love that people reached out to me to give me their feedback and their experience. So I would love to hear more if you guys are out there and you hear this and watch this and want to talk to me about it. I'd love that. But yeah, stay weird, everybody. Embrace the weird. And until next time, I will see you next week. Rock and roll, everybody. Keep watching the skies because